All right, hello. We are back. This is the Three Halves podcast. Today's going to be a bit of a different sort of video than the
hmm
last couple of things we've done. So I have up on the screen just the three things that we wanted to do today. We were going to do team reports on the teams that Demitri and I basically used for the duration of Series 4. Um, just like towards the end of it, like what we used in the May International Championship. And this is also the team that Dimitri used to place in the top four of the Champions Cup. And since we haven't had the chance to talk about this, like the format as it is right now on the channel yet, we kind of just talked about what Dynamax meant for competitive Pokemon as a whole. We figured that this would be the video where we talk about the teams that we used throughout the series as it was in general, and just our thoughts, and then how that translates into the upcoming Series 5, which I believe starts in a couple hours when the calendar changes over to July. So we're going to do the team reports, and we'll leave timestamps in the description for each of the team reports in each section of the discussion that we'll have after that. But yeah, I'm going to throw it over to Dimitri, and we'll listen to what he has to say about his team, and then we'll take a look at my team. And then I'll give Dimitri some time to talk about his experience with the team and some of the accomplishments that he had throughout the season with it.
hmm All right, cool. So, um, when I was building for the Champions Cup, the first thing that I knew that I wanted was like a bulky steel type because in 2020, especially in Series 4, it felt like steel types didn't really exist. And like in past formats, I've always really liked steel types, so I wanted to like recreate one. And so the idea I had was like a bulky Excadrill, meant to Dynamax because it gives it self defense and special defense boosts with its stab max moves. And then I decided to give it a weakness policy because it punishes when it's targeting it with super effective moves and it boosts its bulk. So it just made a lot of sense. And then so I had like my main piece that I wanted to use, and then the thing that seemed like a perfect partner for it was Milotic, really bulky, could take advantage of both defense boosts, and like at the time it's giving me a lot of trouble like in practice. So I wanted to I figured it was a good pick because it just felt really strong. And then from there I was like, yeah, Incineroar, intimidate, parting shot. It adds like the perfect support, general bulk to the team. And then Excadrill's natural partner, support Togekiss. The Togekiss Excadrill lead is just so amazing. So I had like a core of four at that point, and they were like, it felt really strong, but I knew there were a few issues that I needed to cover still. Stuff like Sun gave it a lot of trouble, some water type, stuff like that. So, and one thing I knew that I wanted in a Dynamax format was like an alternate mode. If I had like at least two different Pokemon I could Dynamax, I can really adjust my game plan depending on different matchups. It just felt really strong. And a really powerful Dynamax Pokemon that seemed to cover the weaknesses I had with the original four was Dracozolt. So I decided to add that, and then from there, Whimsicott was a perfect fit to support that mode while still also working with the other mode, and it added Tailwind to a team that was really middling in speed across the board. So it was a really nice fit. All right, so Excadrill, here's the Excadrill set. The first thing you'll probably notice that it's really slow, really bulky. I basically decided that I wanted to like reinvent Excadrill. Like I said earlier, it takes advantage of defense boosts, punishing super effective hits, which makes it really hard to deal with. Because if you leave it alone, it does a ton of damage. It gets a Swords Dance off. It can start boosting the partners. It's a really good lead next to Togekiss or Milotic. I can give either of them the appropriate defense boosts, make them really hard to take out. Milotic can abuse Excadrill's pressure to start coiling. Um, the other thing about Excadrill is it's also a really good Pokemon in the Dracozolt mode as well. Usually in the back, it can still work even without Dynamaxing, just because Excadrill is just a good Pokemon all around. The big thing with this Excadrill that I really liked is that it was like a common Pokemon used in an unexpected way, which is something I've done in past formats as well. Just giving something that usually ran really offensive, a lot of bulk. It catches opponents off guard. I know exactly what my Excadrill is going to do, whereas my opponents might not, and I can use that to my advantage. Um, yeah, the EV spread is just like really bulky. I gave it enough attack to hit a point where the Adamant Nature gave it an extra stat point. Bulk to live, Life Orb Phantasm when not max. So that means it could take like a +2 max Phantasm when it's max. And it also lives Life Orb Wildfire from Charizard. Not in the sun, obviously, but just a regular one when it's not Dynamax. So yeah, Excadrill, probably the most important Pokemon of the whole team. It's kind of the key to everything. One of my favorite Pokemon to use all format. Yeah, it was just amazing. And then next up, we've got Milotic. Milotic was a really important partner for both Excadrill and Dracozolt. They're both big physical attackers, and they're like the main source of damage output on the team. So I really couldn't let Intimidate hinder me too much. And so Milotic was a perfect fit. I needed a water type. With a couple defense boosts from Excadrill, this Milotic can honestly just win games on its own. Like the Cold Hypnosis set is insane. Like just if it's left alone for too long, it just becomes like impossible to take out. And when it's next to some crazy Dynamax Pokemon, it's hard to afford the turns to target it down. So it's just ridiculous. The big thing with this Milotic on this team is that like its massive bulk, along with like Hypnosis and Recover, it lets it stall out Dynamax, Trick Room, Tailwind, whatever, which feels really important in this format. If you can like effectively stall out your opponent's key turns, and then use yours later, you're in a really good spot. And so Milotic was really good for that. Yeah, Milotic was a really important Pokemon on the team all around. The EV spread is like really straightforward. Since defense is its lowest stat, I decided to invest heavily in that. I went for HP for max bulk, and then Calm Nature because special defense was still the highest out of the 2 defense stats. So I got more points with a Calm Nature. And I decided I didn't really care about speed creeping. So, yep, that's Milotic. Next up, Togekiss. Yeah, can't really go wrong with this. Support Babiri Togekiss. Next to Excadrill was just by far the most common lead. You just follow me, Swords Dance, whatever, and you just get going. And then with defense boosts, it becomes like so hard to get rid of Togekiss quickly enough. So it just sits there. It can protect or follow me. Can start yawning things. One thing about the Togekiss Extra mode that I really liked is that like there aren't too many moves that hit both Togekiss and Excadrill effectively. So I can either follow me for things that will target Excadrill, like a ground move, for example, and then if I predict my opponent to go for a steel move, I could just protect Togekiss, and Excadrill's not too worried about that. So that was like a really powerful option to have. During the Champions Cup, my Dracozolt didn't have Protect, so it was really important to be able to use this Togekiss to protect it from things. So it was really good for both modes. Yeah, and I decided to go like really physically bulky. It's pretty standard spread. It lives +2 Phantasm from Dragapult, so if like they get a weakness policy boost or something. And then I just dumped the rest in special defense. But yeah, Togekiss, amazing all around, good for both modes. Just it's hard to go wrong with this set. Next up is Incineroar, another pretty natural fit. It's hard, like especially in Series 4, having one of the 2 fire type intimidators felt really important unless you were running like some hyper offensive team. Yeah, I decided to use Incineroar instead of Arcanine because I felt like the fake out pressure was really important on this team. I wanted to be able to position better because I felt like board control in the Dynamax format was really important. If I could position my Dynamax, get it off at the right time, that was felt like the key to winning a lot of different games. And I like the dark typing as well. Just having to go through just felt pretty important in such a when Dragapult is so strong. Probably the weirdest thing about this Incineroar is the Shukaberry. I decided to hold it because the team was the Excadrill matchup, opposing Excadrill matchup wasn't perfect, and Shukaberry on Incineroar completely flipped the matchup between the two. You could see, I mean, Fezzi also used a Shuka Arcanine to win the Champions Cup, so I think it was a really good pick, especially at that point in the meta. Turning a disadvantage matchup into an advantage one is just such a huge deal, and it could flip games where recovery rarely feels like it really affects the outcome of games. So I really like Shuka. Shuka felt amazing. And also the EV spread on this Incineroar is a bit more offensive. A big thing with this team is that like Excadrill and Dracozolt are really like the only sources of damage output. So I decided to go more offensive with my Incineroar so that it could act as another pillar of offense, a little bit at least. It has like enough attack to one-hit KO like a no-bulk Dragapult, not Dynamax, which means a two-hit KO is Dynamax, which is just pretty solid. Yeah, and parting shot on this Incineroar was so important. Like I said, this team, like especially the extra mode of this team, is all about being able to bulk through things. So having parting shot to add to that along with intimidate, it was so important. Incineroar was amazing. And now onto the more offensive mode of the team, starting with Dracozolt. Dracozolt was a really good fit because it benefited a lot from the same support Pokemon as Excadrill, while playing completely differently. It's like really hard for opposing teams to cover a possible Excadrill mode and a Dracozolt mode just because they're so different and they cover such different things. The sheer offensive pressure of Dracozolt was ridiculous. It's such a threatening Pokemon in so many ways. You have to respect it like in team preview. You always have to respect it, the possibility of it coming out, which allows every other member of the team to benefit in various ways. Like if someone wants to cover for Dracozolt, I can just like lead Excadrill instead, get a free Swords Dance. If I lead Dracozolt next to my Milotic, it's hard for the opponent to ignore the Dracozolt, so I get free coils up. If I lead Dracozolt next to Whimsicott usually is like a free target for opponents, especially when it doesn't have Protect, but you can't ignore the Dracozolt there, so Whimsicott gets to kind of do whatever it wants. Dracozolt helped a lot with Sun, being able to set up electric terrain to avoid Sleep Powder, just having a good typing matchup with Charizard. It was really important for that because the other mode was pretty Sun weak. It dealt with Corviknight, which was pretty strong at the time, and was one of the hardest things for Excadrill to deal with, so Dracozolt was perfect for that. And it was the most important Pokemon in dealing with Gigantamax Lapras, which is just such an insanely powerful Pokemon. Being able to just one-shot it when it Gigantamax before it moves is insane. Not many Pokemon can do that, and having that option was really strong. Another thing with Dracozolt is it's like one of like two good electric types in the entire format. And I feel like electric was a pretty important type to have around. So Dracozolt was really good for that. And yeah, I originally ran Max Quake or Earthquake, which became Max Quake, because giving special defense boosts to things is amazing on this team since it was built around Excadrill doing that anyway. So yeah, Dracozolt, amazing. I love him. One of my favorite Pokemon now. He's so good. And the last member of the team is Whimsicott. Whimsicott has been one of my favorite Pokemon to use for like the entirety of 2020. I really like the way Tailwind works now. The dynamic speed changes makes Whimsicott feel so strong. On this team, originally, I just liked the idea of a Dracozolt Whimsicott lead. It felt like a lot of teams could not handle that, and I could just completely run through unprepared teams. But Whimsicott ended up also being amazing for the Excadrill mode of the team. Like, for example, a lot of times I'd lead Excadrill Togekiss. I would just like follow me Swords Dance, whatever. Togekiss eventually goes down. Excadrill's got a couple defense boosts set up. Then Whimsicott comes in. I set up Tailwind. I'm faster than stuff like Dragapult, and I just clean up the game from there. So Whimsicott was really good for that. I really liked having Taunt on this set. There are a few things like Will-O-Wisp into my physical attackers, or Haze, getting rid of all the setup moves I have, and just stopping late game Trick Rooms from a Dusclops or something. Taunt was really important for stuff like that. I also ran Energy Ball on this set because there are a few things like Rotom Wash, which gives my Milotic trouble that it helps with. It hits opposing Milotic, which can give Excadrill trouble. Can hit Rhyperior, which gives Dracozolt trouble. It just felt really good on this team. Another really cool thing about this Whimsicott set is it's like pretty much the perfect counter to opposing Coil Milotic because it just taunts them and they can hit them with Energy Ball. So yeah, that's pretty much the team. This is like one of my favorite teams I've probably ever built. It just felt so strong, especially at the time, and I'm really proud I was able to do well with it at the Champions Cup.
All right. So now we are moving on from the Sim Squad, and just as to throw it out, that's just a bit of a joke because Demitri loved his Dracozolt on that team so much that he joked that he was like a simp for Dracozolt.
That's my boy.
But yeah, so we are moving on to the Swag Squad. I felt that I wanted to keep in line with the alliterative names. So this is the Swag Squad, and at first glance it's not incredibly interesting just because it just looks like good stuffs plus, and then there's a Grimmsnarl. But hopefully some of the sets will be a bit more interesting. So the initial premise of the team was I was just like I was building for the May International Challenge, and um, I just had the idea to run Dragapult plus Self Swagger because obviously like in Series 4, Dragapult felt like the most potent offensive threat by far. So having Self Swag to instead of having to deal damage to Dragapult with something like a Shadow Sneak, um, and because it felt like at times if you lead something like say like Dusclops or Dragapult into like as a lead, you have like conflicting goals in terms of like speeds because you can because Dragapult's so fast and you have like the typical like trick room modes with Dusclops, and so Self Swagger just seemed and it just seemed like an effective best of one strategy because the May International Challenge was played in best of one. And so I chose Grimmsnarl as the partner for Dragapult for this strategy because it provides fake out support, it has pretty naturally good type synergy with Dragapult, and it has T-Wave to make the matchup against opposing Dragapults a bit more consistent as well. And then from there, it was kind of just I added Togekiss to help with the to help Dragapult as well because I ran Lumberry to be able to self swagger myself, but also it wound up being really beneficial as a way to be able to set up Dragon Dances in front of things that had Will-O-Wisp or Yawn, and I can just take them and set up to sweep in the end game. And so from there, I wanted to create like a secondary mode. Demitri said something similar to this, where he felt like it's nice to have like a dual pronged mode where you have two different prime Dynamax candidates that you can use depending on the matchup. And so I felt like Dragapult, especially, you'll see in the set that it doesn't have Protect. And so positioning based play was really, really difficult. Leading Dragapult just meant that I had to be confident that I was going to be able to get set up in order to just spam offensive moves straight out the gate. So Excadrill provided a bit of a slower mode because I decided to run a weakness policy set like Demitri that relies more on getting set up and using max moves to give defense boosts to the other members and to help Excadrill have more staying power and to eventually get weakness policy. And because similar to the way that Togekiss and Whimsicott acted as a really, really effective support for Excadrill and Dracozolt, I felt that Grimmsnarl and Togekiss provided really, really good support for Excadrill and Dragapult on my team. And then from there, it's pretty, standard building process. Arcanine was really effective damage control with Intimidate, Will-O-Wisp, and Snarl. It's really good at handling opposing Dragapults, and then later on, things like Rillaboom and Cinderace. It felt really, really important to have the Intimidate in order to deter those and to just make them less threatening to the rest of the team. And then after that, I added Rotom Wash to help check sand and other waters. Primarina was a huge, huge issue for the team. And I think that if I didn't have any way to hit it, it would have just been like an auto loss at times. So having Rotom there to make sand a bit more consistent and not have to completely rely on the offense from Excadrill was really important. And then, beating waters like Primarina and Melodic were also really, really important. So yeah, so that was kind of the process that I took towards building the team, and then we'll hop into the sets. So the first up is Dragapult. So this is like the main source of damage on the team, and this is the first Pokemon that I decided to use. It's an Adamant Nature, which meant that I wasn't able to, because Max Speed Timid or like Jolly Dragapult can outspeed Pokemon in the base like 80 speed. Like Togekiss, Venusaur, Braviary, Dragapult's able to outspeed Venusaur in Sun or Togekiss at +2 or in Tailwind and things like that. Unfortunately, this Dragapult wasn't able to do that, but I felt that the Adamant Nature was necessary to provide the firepower that I needed, because being able to just like self-swagger into Dragapult on turn 1 and just nuke something on the field like confidently was really, really important at times, and just felt like a necessary element in order to make the strategy itself feel compelling enough to use. So the spread is just max attack, enough speed to outspeed Inteleon, because that's just about the only relevant, or at least like semi-relevant Pokemon that I was able to outspeed when going Adamant, and then the rest was just in HP and then 4 in defense and Spideft, so I'm not wasting a stat. And then the moveset's pretty straightforward as well. I feel like physical Dragapults really, really want to be running a dragon move, whether it's Dragon Darts or Dragon Claw, and Phantom Force, Fly, and then I chose to run Dragon Dance over Protect, mainly just because, well, one, it benefits Dragapult. Having Lumberry means that it's able to set up Dragon Dance confidently in a lot of situations where other Dragapults that are like Life Orb, for example, might just be forced to Dynamax and eat up a Will-O-Wisp. And so Dragon Dance was really nice, and because later on it was really, really beneficial in that I could lead Dragapult into teams that didn't have ways of hitting Togekiss super hard or didn't have good spread damage, and just set up with Dragapult and sweep from there. And I do at times wish that I had Protect, but with Lumberry I really, really liked the set. So yeah, that was the Dragapult. And also just in general, Dragapult was important for beating certain Pokemon in the end game that the rest of the team had trouble with. Like Gastrodon was so difficult for the team to handle if I didn't preserve anything like that threatened it offensively, because I have Arcanine and Rotom, which just absolutely lose to it in the end game. So yeah. So we are moving on to the next member, which is our Grimmsnarl. So this is pretty much the only unique thing about the team, but I found it to be really, really important. And the initial premise of Grimmsnarl was to do the Self-Swagger strategy and to have Thunderwave as speed control. But when I was, theory crafting with the team, I knew I wanted to run Focus Sash, because that means just like I ensure that I at least get like a fake out off, and then I can potentially like Swagger the next turn. And so that I get at least like a couple moves out of Grimmsnarl at the bare minimum. And then I thought about what offensive move I wanted to run, and I don't necessarily know like how it like occurred to me, but I decided to run Assurance. And what wound up happening was, because the self-swagger strategy just totally gets eaten up by redirection, Grimmsnarl became like not entirely like, the self-swagger Pokemon, but more the I let it into Excadrill a lot, or not into Excadrill, into Dusclops next to Excadrill, so I could use like Max Quake or Max Steel Spike depending on what was next to Dusclops, and then take out Dusclops with Assurance. And so the Adamant max attack with Assurance was really, really, really strong with how prolific Dusclops was in the format, as well as things like Dragapult. I could safely like Steel Spike with Excadrill into Dynamax Dragapult, even if they were weakness policy, and they led something like Dragapult Mimikyu into Grimmsnarl Excadrill, and I could just like Steel Spike into the Dragapult and Assurance turn 1 and just like delete it like right off the bat, and that was really, really, really strong for the team. I really, really like this set. There were times where I wish that I didn't have Swagger, just because Grimmsnarl wouldn't have anything to do other than like Swagger my opponent, which isn't the most consistent strategy. But it was at times like really, really strong. The self-swagger strategy was really, really effective at just winning on the lead. And there were other times you'll see that I ran Safeguard on Togekiss, and I used Safeguard on like the early turns where Togekiss was out, to bring in Grimmsnarl and self-swagger something like my Dragapult or my Excadrill. And then there were other times where they would set Misty Terrain, and I would use Swagger to boost my Excadrill or Dragapult's attack. So it was a good move, but definitely more gimmicky than I'm typically used to. But bear in mind that it was built for the best of one format. Thunderwave was really, really helpful in just controlling things, controlling speed. So things like Venusaur were just such a bother to have to deal with. And having, the combination of Lumberry on Dragapult to just safely be able to eat up sleep powders, and Thunderwave to make it slower than pretty much everything else on my team other than Grimmsnarl and Togekiss in Sun was really, really, really valuable. So I really, really liked this Grimmsnarl set. It's about the one interesting thing that I made in Series 4, but I'm definitely very proud of it.
Also, you can go with Thunderous Mode and Tear Fusion everything.
Yes, that is
Just
also
had
true.
to, had to put that in there.
Yeah, and so like it's unfortunate, but it is true that I definitely did that at times.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good. There's a reason that it was so potent back in the day. Even with the confusion nerf, it's definitely still a very strong strategy. Although the one thing I will say is that as you look through this team, there are a lot of really inaccurate moves. So like I have Swagger, which is 85, and Thunderwave on Grimmsnarl, which is 90, and then Hydro Pump on Rotom, which is 80, and it was just a mess a lot of times. So I can't necessarily say that this team was the epitome of consistency, but it definitely had a lot of tricks and a lot of ways to control the flow of the game, which I liked. All right, so moving on to the Excadrill. So like I said before, is the consistency of the team was definitely in jeopardy if I was just to rely on the surprise factor of the self swagger strategy, plus the fact that it just completely gets nullified by redirection. So Excadrill provided a very consistent game plan that I felt was more dependent on me being able to play the positioning game and set up with defense boosts. So I really, really liked Excadrill as the alternate mode to this team. So I ran a weakness policy set like Demitri, and I decided to run max speed because I don't have the option to run Tailwind like Demitri did. I do have Thunderwave, but that's not anywhere near like a consistent like speed control option, especially when Excadrill is so strong being led next to Togekiss. And then just being able to like use Excadrill independent of the Grimmsnarl Dragapult strategy was really important. So that's why I decided to go max speed. The HP and special defense investment was adapted like later on when I realized that I was getting one shot by base 150 Max Geyser off of Hydro Cannon. So this set lives that 15 out of 16 times. And then it's just the standard Iron Head, Sword Stance, high horsepower protect set. Yeah, this team really, really needed the consistent methodical play that weakness policy Excadrill showcases. And it just like Demitri said, being able to give boosts to things like my Rotom and my Togekiss, and being able to spread Yawn and set up nasty plots with Rotom in position that way was also really strong. If you know much about like the format, it's pretty Excadrill's strength in the format is very apparent, especially when paired with the Togekiss Arcanine Rotom Core. And then, so this set is this is very similar to Dimitri's. I elected to run Safeguard over Protect, just because my team didn't have quite as many like options to prevent things like sleep or burn, like Demitri had taunt on his Whimsicott and max lightning access on his Dracozolt. So I decided to run Safeguard, and like I was saying before, it offered me the option to set up Safeguard and then self-swagger into Excadrill with Grimmsnarl. This really, really felt like the glue of the team. It was able to support both the Excadrill and the Dragapult modes by being able to follow me to redirect away from the two and having them set up their Dragon Dances or Swords Dances. Like Demitri said, like Togekiss is the like naturally like perfect partner for Excadrill because of how well the types match up, and so like you force your opponent to either like Steel Spike into Togekiss or like take the risk of quaking into the Follow Me, and it's just, that mind game is like really really strong. And like I said, just like the Togekiss Excadrill lead and that pair is just like the epitome of consistency. It felt like in this format. And then Yawn, really really good at controlling opposing Dynamax threats, being able to just like Yawn on turn one, and then like say like protect Excadrill and Yawn on turn one, into like a threatening Dynamax Pokemon, and then be able to like set up from there, and then they could easily attack through my protect and activate my weakness policy, and then I'm like perfectly set up to like just like win from there. So that was just like really really strong. Togekiss is just like, we'll talk later about this, but Togekiss just felt like the most amazing Pokemon in this format, in both of its forms, both as like a support role and as an offensive role. And clearly on this team, like running a support Togekiss was like really valuable because I had really like two already very potent sources of damage in Excadrill and Dragapult, and in Grimmsnarl too almost. And then Arcanine, very very standard set. I think in hindsight I would have switched the berries between Arcanine and Rotom. I feel like Citrus Berry was probably better on Arcanine than it was on Rotom. But yeah, running max speed so that I outspeed things like Excadrill, and at times I ran into a couple in the IC. I ran into a couple of Lucario, so being able to outspeed and Will-O-Wisp, that was pretty important. I just didn't see like there was little point to not running max speed. And then I decided, Demitri and I had like a discussion about this, because I think the original version of the team had Flamethrower over Flare Blitz, and I decided to change to Flamethrower, which I very much am happy about, just because the team would have been absolutely useless against something like Ferrothorn without the special option, which was the argument that Demitri gave to me. And then just in general, like Arcanine was like really really important damage control on this team, like I said earlier, and that was the kind of the point of running it. With Intimidate, Snarl, Will-O-Wisp to control like opposing Excadrill, and stuff like that. And I chose to run Arcanine over Incineroar just because, one, I didn't have like speed control options, at least as like consistent ones, and then I already had the dark typing covered in Grimmsnarl, and I felt that like having the room in my moveset to run Will-O-Wisp in order to better check things like Excadrill, and Tyranitar, and just like physical threats in general, was really 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 important. And it wound up being that like Arcanine being able to like hard check things like Rillaboom was really really important for the team. And then obviously I think that not being able to resist Fairy and not being weak to fighting was also like important for this team as well, just because I think Dynamax Togekiss at times, fairies in general for the team were like definitely a very very big issue, just like even with this like composition. So I think that having Arcanine instead of Incineroar I think was the correct choice. And then lastly we have Rotom Wash with the Citrus Berry. Like I said, I think I would have preferred that those were switched. But this, pretty standard set. I just went max speed bulky so that you outspeed base 80s. There's not much to speak of when it comes to the spread, unfortunately. But yeah, so dual stab with Thunderbolt and Hydro Pump, and Nasty Plot to hopefully abuse Fake Out and Follow Me support from Grimmsnarl and Togekiss. Rotom was really, really important for checking both waters and flyings. So things like Gyarados, Braviary, Togekiss, and then waters like Primarina, Melodic, and Dracovish. Rotom Wash was just so consistent at beating those strategies that I just don't know if the team, because Rotom like needed to be useful outside of Dynamax because of how strong the other candidates were. Of course, there were times where I decided to Dynamax Rotom just because of how good it was in the matchup. But I felt like having Rotom being able to independently check like the waters and the like flying types that like threatened to like build momentum with speed or just like nuke my other Dynamax candidates was really, really important. So that's why Rotom was on the team, and it also wound up being like a really, really effective check to sand that I think would have been a bit more difficult for the team in like had I not run another ground immunity, a loose ground immunity, of course, because Excadrill being the primary ground user can just mold breaker through levitate. But being able to like check the sand rush Excadrills was really, really important. But yeah, like I said, this team was full of a lot of like inaccurate moves, and it at times, the self swagger strategy was certainly like meant to be a best of one strategy that caught people by surprise. And I'll admit that the May IC didn't go super, super well for me, but I had some good like ladder runs with this team. Like I think I got like 14th on like the showdown ladder with it, and I enjoyed playing it, and it was the team that I used for a good month or so from like when the May IC happened till now. But yeah, I figured that I would just at least like talk about the team. I don't have the same accolades as Demitri has with his team, but yeah.
Yeah, no, this team's sick.
Yeah,
I really like this team too.
Yeah, both of our teams I think were cool.
Yeah, I like how we were able to note a lot of the similarities, even though the Pokemon don't exactly match up. But yeah, they're very similar in function when you really look at it. But yeah.
Yeah, the Excadrill definitely fulfilled like similar roles.
All right.
So we wanted to quickly do a sort of like wrap up where we talk about Series 4, like what we saw from Series 4 and how we think that will like translate into what we'll see in Series 5. So obviously Dragapult was definitely it felt like the meta defining Pokemon of Series 3 and 4. It was just so incredibly potent and difficult to check. So yeah, this is our little slight jab at Dragapult.
We have to get some respect to the king of Dynamax.
We had to get some revenge on him. Of course I'm guilty of using him, but I very much recognized how silly he was at times with like how effective he was. He was just, as a Dynamax Pokemon, he was just unmatched.
Yeah,
except
it's just the way it gets so much stronger. Like when it Dynamaxes compared to its regular form, like maybe more than any other Mon.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
The only rival in terms of like for like the best Dynamax Pokemon in the format was probably Togekiss. And even then, it's just
but even then, like Togekiss can operate on its own in a lot of ways.
So. And Ghost is just such a ridiculously good offensive typing. It's like,
especially when you go physical.
Yeah, there was so much going for it. But we will be talking about how we think that Series 5 will change the shape of the meta. So here we have just on the left, we had a list of Pokemon that we feel like are gonna see a drop in usage just because
at least a little bit.
Yeah, at least like a little bit. I definitely think like things like Dragapult and Dusclops and Rotom and Primarina, I feel like those are gonna take a bit of a hit just due to some of the additions from the Isle of Armor. And then on the right we have some Pokemon that we feel like benefited a fair bit from the new Pokemon and just like the meta changes that have come about since the DLC dropped. Demitri, did you want to talk about any of them in particular?
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, I'll talk about a few. Togekiss, the thing with Togekiss is that Amoonguss is a thing now, and Amoonguss does what Support Togekiss does, except maybe just better in a lot of ways, which unfortunately means people will be running more Crit Kiss, which I hate, but...
You're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah. So yeah, Togekiss will still obviously be amazing. I feel like it could definitely still be the number one Mon, but I'm not 100% sure anymore. We'll have to see. Excadrill, I just feel like the addition of a couple more steals gives it a little bit more competition. Stuff like Rillaboom isn't ideal for it. Dragapult we talked about a lot. It's just like It's just not quite the same anymore. Stuff like Porygon 2 checks
Yeah,
it
I
pretty
think I think I
hard.
think the big thing is Porygon 2 being able to basically wall it
Yeah,
and hit it back pretty hard is like really really
yeah.
important.
P2 is like the perfect counter to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so in that vein, I think Porygon 2 will, likely take Dusclops' place. At least
I hope.
anticipate
I think they'll both
I
still be good, but
anticipate that Porygon 2 will be at a similar rate of usage, if not more so, than Dusclops
yeah,
towards,
yeah.
once, Series 5 settles in. Um,
Porygon 2 is so much cooler than Dusclops.
yeah. uh, we missed Porygon 2. We really like
Yeah,
Porygon 2. And
it's our
then,
boy from 2017.
closer towards the beginning of Series 3, because, like, this difference between Series 3 and Series 4 wasn't too drastic. So, like, something
Mhm.
like Durant, I feel like is going to fall off really, really, really hard just because there are a lot of really, really strong special threats. We have more Intimidators. I think some of the Intimidators got stronger. Um,
Yeah,
and there's just, and, it just seems like a hard world out there for Durant.
people have
Um,
adapted.
yeah. So I still think it was pretty good up until the end of Series 4. But I think it'll be difficult to use moving forward, especially since, like, in my experience in playing in Series 5, I think it's a lot easier to be able to, like, slow down the pace of the game, which, like, a hustle Pokemon like Durant that doesn't have quite as good of coverage as Dracozolt will really,
Mhm.
really have a hard time with, because you can only get 3 turns of Dynamax, and then the rest of the time you have to be hitting your Hydro Pumps. So
Yeah, God, screw hustle.
yeah, so I don't see Durant being a main force like it was for Series 3 and 4.
Yeah,
And then even something like Torkoal, with the addition of Politoed, being like a relevant weather in the meta, because hardly anybody ran Pelipper. Um, so Politoed
yeah,
existing, being able to, like, effectively, like, neuter opposing Torkoal, I feel like will be big, especially since we have Politoed and Kingdra, so there's, like, a decent incentive to have, like, a weather mode where you can um, it's like, we didn't really have a super strong, like, Swift Swim Pokemon before.
that's with
Um,
Suicolo, and it never felt amazing.
yeah, and we have an even better, like, Rain Setter. So
Hmm. Yeah, Torkoal finally has some competition at least outside of just Tyranitar,
yeah,
and Tyranitar feels like it does a lot better against rain than something like Torkoal would.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I think Stun will still be really good. Like just Charizard is too strong,
Yeah.
Venusaur is too strong for it to ever be bad. But
Hmm.
I think it'll take a small hit at least.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
and then yeah, the three waters, Milotic, Primarina, Rotom. Basically, just the existence of Rillaboom makes their life a lot harder,
Hmm.
way harder, because Rillaboom is pretty insane.
Yeah.
I think they're all still pretty solid.
Yeah.
Rotom isn't the only electric type in the format anymore, so
Yeah.
that's that hurts them a
Also,
little bit.
like, if we're, with the addition of Magnezone, I feel like a lot
Yeah,
of gets a bit harder to use because you just set up Max Lightning and you can't put it to sleep or anything. Um,
yeah,
and then, with something like an Assault Vest set, Magnezone probably does pretty dang well against all three of them.
yeah. It's a pretty good counter all three, especially if you can Dynamax it.
Yeah.
Also,
Um,
Amoonguss makes all three of the waters' lives
yeah,
a lot harder.
that's the other thing.
That's a big one.
And Rotom can't even, like, Max Lightning to avoid Spore. It's just
Oh,
Amoonguss, like, being there
yeah.
to, like, wall waters is just something that we didn't
Yeah.
have before. So I think
Also, the
that's,
Prim stabs.
yeah, because we didn't really have any defensive grass types towards the end.
Yeah, it's true. It was really just Whimsicott and Venusaur, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
So
then we
like,
had Rillaboom towards the end, which you could play defensively, but a lot of people just, like, ran, like, Woodhammer sets.
yeah,
And uh, Rillaboom doesn't do super great against, like, things like Dragapult, so it wasn't as, like, centralizing of a Pokemon. But we feel like moving towards Series 5 that we'll see a lot more Rillaboom, because we already
yeah,
have um,
yeah. Really was godly.
on, like, the usage stats, like, Rillaboom is, like, shot up in usage because the Gmax form is just really really scary.
So strong. Yeah, I think Rillaboom might be number one in usage right now, at least on Showdown.
Yeah,
It's pretty great.
it was at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. But yeah, having some actual defensive grass types makes these waters a lot harder.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's it for pretty much all the big threats we think are getting a little weaker at
Hmm.
least. For stuff that's getting stronger, um, Whimsicott, especially with the addition of Cinderace recently, it feels like Hyper Offense is really strong right now. And Whimsicott is just like the key to that. It's it's so good. And with like Togekiss maybe being worse, it as a fairy has its own role
Mm-hmm.
now, which is really cool because you can run like Whimsicott Amoonguss and like Whimsicott covers can make the team like supports like the offense fast mode of the team, and then if Drifloon goes up, you've got an Amoonguss. So it's like stuff like that makes Whimsicott feel a lot stronger to me,
Mm-hmm.
which I like. I love Whimsicott.
Yeah, Whimsicott's great. With the
Yeah,
dynamic speed change, it's a very interesting Pokemon.
yeah. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm really happy it's back up at the top. It fell down a little bit, but it's always been good.
Yeah.
Venusaur, unfortunately, my least favorite Pokemon ever. It gets Gmax Wild Grass now, which is just so dumb.
Yeah.
Having to play more mind games against stupid Sun teams is just I it's dumb.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, Dimitri and I were having a discussion before we hopped on to do the presentation, and we were like, we think that Sun has taken a bit of a hit, but at the same time, Venusaur got significantly better with getting access to, as Dimitri puts it, wild grass. Um, but yeah, the damage, like Gmax Vine Lash, like like say for example when back at like Dallas, which is like the first regional of the game. Aaron Trailer won with Gmax Wildfire on non-solar power Charizard,
yeah,
and that just goes
it
to
just
show
shows how
like
strong.
how incredibly like strong that 1/6 damage per Pokemon is, and giving that to something that's already problematic like Venusaur just feels like oh,
Yeah.
we're
The
not
big
looking
thing to
forward
me
to
with
it.
Venusaur is like the fact that it puts on so much pressure when it isn't Dynamax through Sleep Powder. And then it's like if you want to cover Sleep Powder, you're not covering Vine Lash. You can't fake it out. Like you can set up Safeguard, that doesn't do anything.
Hmm.
It just makes it feel like a really like a coin flip. It's brutal.
Yeah,
I'm not happy about it.
yeah, it's definitely a very very difficult. It was already a difficult Pokemon to handle.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can't even redirect with a Mungus anymore. Like
Yeah.
you can't redirect with Mungus. Period.
Yeah, and it hits Togekiss hard with the ooze.
Yeah.
Problem. Then we've got Hatterene and Didi, just like side spam in general,
Hmm.
because of expanding force, like
Yeah.
against
The
Rotom.
addition of expanding force did a lot to like help enhance psychic types, especially because Indeedee getting access to both expanding force and psychic terrain, being
Hmm.
able to help support like psychic types that are next to it, and just like as Demetri was saying, like the term like side spam, you just spam expanding force.
Win.
Yeah.
Yeah. A
So
lot of teams are underprepared for that still.
yeah,
It's
I
it's
agree.
insane. The fact that Indeedee has so much good support and now it has like significant offensive pressure as well
Hmm.
is crazy.
Yeah.
It's it's an insane aspect. Yeah, terrain feels so much more important now too, with Rillaboom. So
Yeah.
it's like a Rillaboom and Indeedee kind of battle now.
Yeah.
They both feel really important.
Yeah. With the addition of Grassy Glide and expanding force, terrain feels like a
Yeah.
significant element of the game that it didn't used to feel like.
Yo, Pincurchin though, rising voltage. Watch
Pincurchin.
out.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
then yeah,
you.
Hatterene just benefits for the
Yeah,
same reason.
for sure.
Just the
And we'll talk about some
rotating
other
thing.
psychic types that got introduced in the Isle of Armor as well.
Yeah. Um, and then the two intimidating fire types already were godlike before, but now feel even stronger because a big thing is Rillaboom is so strong now that and these two feel like the best way to counter Rillaboom basically,
Hmm.
which just makes them feel inherently stronger. And also the Series 5 is from my experience so far feels like it's a bit slower paced, so being able to intimidate and switch, snarl, stuff like that
Hmm.
feels even better than it did before. Um, Also, Safeguard Arcanine is really good now with Among Us being around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the addition of both Amoonguss and Rillaboom, having like two more grass types
Yeah.
as like common meta threats makes like both of those Pokemon significantly stronger.
Yeah.
Which I think is
They're
cool
both.
because I think they both like promote a slower like position based style of play, which I think you and I both prefer, and I think is
Yeah.
a bit more engaging for people to watch.
Yeah. It feels like good mons when you can use these two effectively.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so moving into what we think are important additions to the game from the Isle of Armor. So just moving from, we'll just start from the top left corner and work our way down.
Hmm.
So Polytoad making rain like bringing rain back to like
Thank
actual
God.
actual play, I think is like great because Sun was just everywhere towards the end of Series 4, and having like a way to like control something like Charizard's damage just feels like such a relief. Um,
Hmm.
and say for example, like you can lead Kingdra against Sun teams, and then switch in Politoed on turn 1 and go for water moves. If
Yeah.
they lead something like Sun, and just like having that option feels so nice.
Yeah, it's actually so hard for Sun to deal with.
Yeah,
As someone who has used Mega Charizard Y in the past, which isn't exactly the same as current Sun,
yeah.
I hated Politoed back then. So like, it's actually such a big issue. It's so nice that we have something else to compete with Sun and Sand. I mean,
Mhm.
sorry, Hail, you don't really exist, but at least we've got the
Yeah,
big three others now.
yeah, and so the thing is, like, the other thing, like you said, is like, even though things like Vanillix and Alolan Ninetales
Rambo.
existed, you're not switching Alolan Ninetales into a Gmax Wildfire. It's not really doing you
Yeah,
much
good luck
good.
with that.
But switching Politoed into a Gmax Wildfire, that makes you feel good. That makes you
Yeah.
feel good.
Although you're still taking the 1/6,
Yeah,
which is
that's also
pretty
true.
brutal. But it's at least something.
Yeah. All right, next up we have my
Boy.
personal favorite Pokemon, Alolan Marowak. He is back. So I think base Marowak would have a bit of trouble in this format if Dynamax didn't exist, but Dynamax does exist. So
Yeah.
Dynamax, Alolan Marowak under Trick Room does such ridiculous amounts of damage, and we've seen from Dragapult how devastating physical Max Phantasm is, and how much momentum you get by stacking those defense drops. Um, and so yeah, Marowak seems like, and we've played with it a bit. Marowak seems like a really, really, really strong sweeper under Trick Room, um, and he also provides lightning rod support for waters like Azumarill, on like which you see, Politoed, Gyarados,
Yeah,
a lot of
Gyarados
different
feels a lot
things.
better now.
So yeah.
Water, Shifu.
hmm And I
Yeah,
think one of the
also it's
things,
Poltergeist now,
yeah, that's another thing is you
which
have
I
access
think
to,
it's base 140 max move, right? So
yeah,
that's like pretty significant.
base 140
Although I hate
max
the
move.
90 accuracy.
Yeah, the accuracy. Yeah, so I've had discussions with people about this, about Poltergeist and Marowak. I'm personally of the belief that I think that Shadowbone is better, just because having to rely on your opponent to have an item in order to use a ghost move on them just seems like really, really difficult.
Hmm.
So like the thing that I actually just thought of, which I didn't think of before, is like, say for example, um, you bring there's a Chandelure,
Hmm.
and you bring it down to Sash, and you have no way of doing any
Yeah, you
like
can't
passive
even hit it.
damage. You can't touch it because you would have to run something like Bone Meringue, um,
Yeah.
in order to be able to hit it. And personally, I really like running like a support move in that last slot, like Perish Song or Sword
Hmm.
Stance, to like
I
set
ran
up.
Brick Break, which wouldn't even touch the Chandelure.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know, and just like Ghost is Ghost is the reason that Alolan Marowak is so powerful. Like Ghost as an
Hmm.
offensive typing is so strong that being the possibility of being put into a situation where you just don't have access to it at all, or you just miss, just doesn't feel as consistent, and therefore like less appealing to me.
Yeah. The big thing about it is just the stronger max move,
Yeah.
which is like Shadowbone could definitely be better. I think I like Shadowbone more, but still just having the option of Poltergeist is nice. It's a nice little buff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know. It's hard to
it
say.
feels like Brick Room Dragapult in some ways. It's pretty insane how
Yeah.
you if you get a Phantasm off in a good spot, you can just keep going, just
Yeah.
keep spamming it.
And I mean, with
That's
Thick Club,
fun.
he has like some of the highest attack in the game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, pretty much the highest. Yeah,
Pretty much the highest,
pretty
as
good
so long as he's
focus.
holding the Thick Club. But
Yo, weakness policy, Marowak.
And so the other thing is like, I think the only two knockoff Pokemon I can think of in this format are like
Yeah, that's a
Rillaboom
big
and
one.
Ferrothorn. Um, and you just demolish them before they have a chance to like knock off. So you
Yeah,
either like set Trick Room in front of Rillaboom and then flare and destroy them, or you just like flare outside of Trick Room or flare what's outside of Trick Room into Ferrothorn and destroy it. It's like
yeah.
like
Knockoff's a big one.
yeah. But Marowak is just so hard to control with Dynamax because max flare stacks, like makes your flare blitzes stronger, like your fire moves stronger. Phantasm spreads defense drops to make things, weaker to you. It's like it seems like such a strong Dynamax candidate.
Yeah, and then you can also have Quake if you run Boomerang, which is just godlike. Quake is one of the best moves ever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to have another Trick Room sweeper in the meta. It feels like it fills a little bit of a hole. There was nothing quite like Marowak before.
Yeah.
And it works really well with Porygon too.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like as admittedly brain dead as something like Rhyperior.
Yeah, yeah.
Where you just,
Bulldoze.
fall in lead in DD Dusclops and then have Rhyperior in the back, follow me, Trick Room, Bulldoze, Max Rockfall.
Scroll hard Trick Room, dude.
Yeah, like I very much prefer like Marowak as a Trick Room sweeper to the ones that we've had before. But that's also
Yeah,
to be fair, I will admit that that's probably also some of
maybe a
my
little bit
personal
biased.
bias to the Pokemon, but at the same time I feel like it just feels a bit healthier.
Yeah, I agree though.
All right.
Marowak's cool because it feels like one of those mons you can use really well on like hybrid Trick Room stuff, which is like the coolest style of team.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
It's awesome.
Moving on to arguably the most important addition to
Hmm.
the game. And I say that mainly because of just how much it changes the landscape of the format from
Hmm.
being everything revolves around like Dragapult Togekiss.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, Kingdra. You were a group with Polytoad.
Yeah, he is grouped with Politoed. Well, we talked about like, because like I feel like it's very rare that you'll see Kingdra without Politoed, so it's like
Yeah,
they're kind of like a package deal,
yeah.
or at least like it's like squares or rectangles, but rectangles aren't always squares. It's like
Oh yeah, Polytoad is
Politoad's there, but if you
square.
have Politoad's the square, but Kingdra's eh, not always.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah,
I just want to point out the fact that it gets Airstream now is such a massive deal.
yeah, that's true. And even just like having like flying coverage to hit grass types,
Yeah,
in
especially,
rain is like really really strong.
yeah, especially with Mungus around now and Rillaboom.
Yeah. All right, but
Anyway,
Porygon 2,
God, the duck.
the what we have called the savior of VGC 2020, just because like
I miss him
admittedly,
so
like
much.
The Dragapult Togekiss stuff just felt so unhealthy because of how difficult it was to handle it without relying on your own Dragapult and Togekiss.
Yeah, it was like you play the mirror or you play Lapras or you lose. It
Yeah,
felt like a lot of the time.
or you like run like sand, and even then it's like so difficult.
Uh,
So,
yeah,
but yeah, like Porygon 2 coming in to wall both of them and to set up Trick Room in front of them is just, and to be able to like hit them for super effective damage with Ice Beam, it's like Porygon 2 has so much going for it going into Series 5 just with the Pokemon that have been like relevant before. Um it's it just feels like like I said, like the savior of the format, just
yeah. It changes
brings
everything.
consistency to a format where we felt was just always like a toss up.
Yeah, I think a big thing in a good format is they have either Cresselia or Porygon2. Formats without either of those two just feel wrong to me. It's like 2013 you had Crest, 2014 you didn't have either, which felt wrong. 15 you had Crest, 16 you had Crest, 17 you had P2, 18 you had Crest or P2. They were both really good. Um, but like yeah, like now having a Trick Room setter that can do damage again. Sorry, Dusclops.
Hmm.
It feels so good. It
I'm
opens up
sorry.
so much more like options with the way you can play Trick Room, I guess is
Yeah.
what I would like to say.
Yeah, I
Because it's
agree.
like Dusclops, it felt like you really had to commit like hard.
Yeah.
Um, it's like, oh, okay, I'm committing to Dusclops Conkeldurr or whatever. Porygon 2 can like sit there, throw off some boosted ice beams, try attacks, thunderbolts, does good damage. Got like base 105 special attacks, something like that. It's like almost as bulky as Dusclops, I think.
Yeah, I think Dusclops is just a bit.
Really
Dusclops is just a bit bulkier.
Yeah. And also has reliable recovery, which I love.
Yes.
Pain Split. Pain Split was such a weird move. It was annoying to have to play around.
Yeah,
I think actually on the last slide we might have forgot to really talk about Dusclops. The reason I think its usage is going down is because Porygon2 is so good.
Yeah, Porygon2 just feels like a much more consistent Pokemon, and it just feels more flexible. Like you were saying, like Porygon2 has the ability to like be run offensively. It has more reliable recovery. It walls like more important things like Dragapult. And yeah, so when we first started playing in Series 5, we made the joke like Porygon2 always wins in the end game if you can like stall out your opponent's Dynamax. And so like it always felt like, Dusclops, it could 1v1 or like 2v1 certain Pokemon, but Porygon2 feels
really 1v1 because you had to rely on Pain Split.
Yeah. And Porygon can just like 2v1 a lot of like different Pokemon with the right coverage moves and with recover and like smart play with Trick Room, and it's like it just feels like a perfectly like consistent Pokemon. And just
also
love that.
Being weak to Knuckle instead of Phantasm and Darkness is such a big deal.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. The typing is just the typing change from Ghost to normal is huge because Dragapult exists.
Yep, Marowak exists.
Yeah. Although, moving forward into the other Pokemon that we have coming back, we have Terrakion.
Maybe one of the best Porygon2 answers.
Yeah, I think, definitely one of them. There's also Urshifu, which we will talk about in a sec.
Yeah.
But Terrakion certainly is a big threat. So, Terrakion best being known for like the beat up strategy with Whimsicott, just being able to like lead Terrakion Whimsicott on turn 1 and like beat up and just demolish teams. Is definitely like I think the knee-jerk reaction people have to seeing Terrakion coming back. And I do think that most teams that run Terrakion will have some sort of beat up option just because of how potent it is. But I do think that just like Terrakion's naturally amazing like stat distribution and its ability to check Porygon2 will just make it like a really, really strong Pokemon in general.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a viable mon even without beat up.
Yeah.
Rock Fighting is like really good offensive coverage. You hit all the Intimidators for super effective damage, which is such a big deal for like a strong physical mon like Terrakion.
Yeah.
Its defensive capabilities aren't amazing. It doesn't really switch into much, but
it has decent stats to like. It has like decent like natural.
It's got decent bulk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rock Fighting just isn't great defensive typing, I guess.
Yeah. For sure.
A big thing about Terrakion is like every format in the past that Terrakion was like legal in also had a Landorus, which is like the best counter to it. So I think Terrakion in a format without Landorus, it could be really good, even without beat up stuff. I think you could run Swords Dance on it, which is amazing. Close combat, Rock Slide. Like I think it can still definitely get the job done on the right team. Also, it's pretty good against Sand, which is cool.
Yeah.
I like Terrakion. I gotta figure out a cool way to use it.
Yeah. And that's like what I was saying. I feel like a lot of teams will have the option to beat up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like the primary game plan that you run with Terrakion. I think with its like amazing offensive coverage, it's like at an amazing speed tier. Like especially for this format, just because it's once you get past because it's base 108.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's 108. Which just like outspeeds a huge like chunk of the format that we didn't used to have. Which I think will show. And it outspeeds every single Intimidator. And like you said, hits for super effective damage. It outspeeds Charizard, which
it's a great sun check.
Yeah, great sun check.
If you can get around Venusaur, that is. Which is easier said than done.
Yeah. But yeah, Terrakion being an efficient check to Porygon2 and having the option to check things like Sand and all the Intimidators, it just feels like a really like solid Pokemon. And
Oh
I'm,
yeah,
I'm very
definitely.
curious to see how people run it because I think, like you said, it doesn't have to be your North beat up.
Hmm.
So we'll have to see how people try to use it.
Yeah. One last thing I want to mention about Tracheon is that it has three moves that it pretty much always wants: Rock Slide, Close Combat, and Protect.
Hmm.
But the fourth slot can get really interesting with stuff like Quick Guard, or like I said, Swords Dance. I think would be good. You can run,
Iron
you know,
Head,
Boom,
Earthquake.
run a ground move. I don't know. It's cool. I'm curious to see, like you said, I'm curious to see how where Tracheon ends up.
Yeah,
In the future.
yeah, I agree. I feel like before, um, I suppose like that fourth move slot has always been pretty flexible.
Hmm.
But in this format, it definitely feels like that flexibility is even
Super
more
important.
important because
Yeah.
by running Earthquake you get access to Max Quake. By running Iron Head you get access to Max Steel Spike.
Yeah.
There's a lot more like things that you can do because of that slot.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah,
Tracheon's cool. I'm curious to see what it ends up doing.
yeah, I agree.
But yeah. Moving on,
Moving
we've
on,
got my boy
we've
Magnezone.
Magnezone, Magnezone.
I'm really excited about Magnezone. Like I mentioned in like the team report part of this video, is that I really like having steel types. Like, okay, one thing I've always said is I think there's a big difference between a steel type and a steel. Bisharp is a steel type, but it doesn't feel like a steel.
Yeah,
Durant is a steel type, but it doesn't feel like a steel. Sash Excadrill is a steel type, doesn't feel like a steel. I want a bulky steel that can like take fairy hits and like sit on the field, stuff like that, you know.
yeah.
And Magnezone, perfect. It's got great defensive stats, pretty good typing. Also, it's an electric type. There were no good electric types before. It was just
Yeah.
Dragozolt and Rotom.
Yeah, and
I
so like
think.
we were saying, like the absence
Mhm.
of electric types made it really really hard to like consistently check waters, especially because something like Dracozolt, you either Dynamax or you miss,
Mhm.
and then I feel like that's like a similar problem that I had with Rotom is like it's a really really good check to waters, but it also being a water type itself like tasked itself with being like a really good check to things like rocks, and just like having to rely on the Hydro Pump wasn't great, and
Mhm.
the fact that like Magnezone converges on the role of checking waters and being a steal is like
Yeah.
super super strong.
Yeah. The fact that you can like combine two roles that are typically separate into one mon
Hmm.
is a big deal. It opens up a lot of new options in team building that weren't there
Yeah.
before.
Also,
Which is,
the other thing about Rotom is like it's pretty weak unless you run like a really offensive set,
gotta
or you
run
run
that
like
spot.
Nasty Plot. But Magnezone has really, really, really good natural bulk. And if you run it with something
And
like
special
Assault
defense.
Vest, like you can offset some of its like weaker
Yeah.
stats. And it has really, really good offense. So you can just like invest in like you can just be like a bulky like special attacker with like and you have so many options to like check things offensively as well as being able to wall a lot of like really important threats like Togekiss.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's like the perfect Togekiss answer, actually,
yeah,
which is really cool.
yeah, it's I'm so looking forward to like using it for the rest because I've been using like we've both been testing it out in practice,
Yeah,
and it's
big
already
fan.
felt like amazing. So
Yeah, I love to use Magnezone in 2017, which is like the only other format where it was a decent mon.
yeah,
And it feels it might be better now. It's really good.
I would argue that it's definitely better.
Yeah, there
Having
are so
access to
many. You can get so creative with the move set now.
yeah.
There it feels like there are so many options. I don't know what the best. I don't know what the best set is. And like different teams can run it in different ways, which I think is really
Yeah.
cool.
One
Uh,
other thing that I want to say about Magnezone is it gets access to body press now, which makes it
yeah, it's a huge deal.
with Steel Spike and like being able to like extend its like physical bulk as well. And then once you lose Dynamax, you have powered up body press, allowing you to like really really effectively check opposing steals, like opposing
Hmm.
Magnezone. Like feels like really 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 strong as well.
Yeah, it does like the Corviknight thing where you
Yeah,
set up defense boost and then start defense boost with Steel Spike and then when Dynamax ends you've got a really strong body press.
yeah,
Which is really cool. Also, and it sets up electric terrain as well for itself. It's
hmm,
really good, and especially good with the Moongus.
yeah. Something
Yeah,
that Rotom couldn't do as well.
yeah, that was so annoying. You just
Hmm.
get put to sleep anyway.
Yeah,
That Magnezone is really cool. Also, it has like two different really good abilities with Sturdy and Magnetol, which can be used
Hmm.
in 4 different ways.
And even
Um,
something like analytic, I feel like could be
it could be
viable,
good, yeah. There's definitely
considering
a
like
place for
yeah, where it is like speed wise, I feel like it could totally like it could happen. People,
that.
someone could
Also,
use
stay
it.
60 speed like everything else in this format.
Yeah, yeah. So I think something that we should talk about is like that like base like 60 speed tier is so crowded now. Like I mean, you just like you rattle off like the base like 60 Pokemon in your head. Like is Magnezone base 60?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we have Magnezone, we have Porygon2, we have Primarina, um, Incineroar, we have Tyranitar
Yeah,
at base 61,
Lapras.
Lapras. I mean, that's already like a ton right there.
There's got
Because
to be more we're forgetting, but that's still a
yeah,
lot on
that's
this
already a
Pokemon.
ton. Because there's already because like those are all really really like important Pokemon to the meta,
Yeah.
and it's like, ugh. So I feel like that'll be interesting to see how like the speeds will match up.
Yeah. Like Magnezone's cool because you can run it a little bit fast to take advantage of something like Airstream or Tailwind, or you can run it in speed and run it in Trick Room. Like
Yeah,
there's so much room for creativity with this Pokemon.
yeah,
It's so cool. And another thing is like on the last slide we showed Excadrill as a mon that might be dropping usage, which is really good for Magnezone because Mold Breaker Excadrill is like the perfect counter to it.
yeah. Because it just
That's gonna get the
destroys you
most
through
level
sturdy,
for
and it's like, yeah,
yeah, yeah. But yeah, Magnezone's really cool. I'm excited.
yeah. All right, moving on. We have another really 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 important Pokemon. I've
Yeah,
I've
maybe the
heard.
biggest.
Yeah, so Amoonguss. I've heard some people say that they feel like it's like really, really good. Just as good as it's always been because it's always been, an amazing Pokemon in VGC.
Arguably the best VGC Pokemon of all time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the contenders for that.
Yeah,
Only like rivaled by something like Landorus.
yeah, maybe Cresselia.
Yeah, or Kang. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's hard to say.
there are contenders, but Amoonguss is like a prime contender
Yeah,
for best of all time.
yeah.
It's a huge deal.
And I do think that I definitely think that it's still really really strong in this format. I've heard some people saying that they find it hard to use and that they don't think it's as good as it has been before.
Mhm.
But just like an alternate like mode of redirection to like stop waters is like really strong. One, two, having like consistent sleep. That all the stupid like yawn tech mons and like blind hypnosis crap, like
Sleep
having
powder.
Amoonguss being a consistent Pokemon to put other Pokemon to sleep is so so nice.
Yeah, because Butterfree doesn't count. Screw Butterfree.
Yeah. I mean, you can miss that.
Yeah,
um
true. Just 2% of the time.
yeah. And the other thing is that Trick Room is significantly, I feel like, will become significantly more common on the majority of teams as opposed to being like a team archetype. Because like in the majority of 2020 so far, it's felt like you either are a Trick Room team or you're not.
Yeah.
Whereas like I feel like with the addition of Porygon2, you can run like a hybrid style of team where you have like the ability to either like abuse an opposing Trick Room, set it for yourself, or just like run a fast mode where you like outrun other like slower teams or like teams that like float around like the middle speed tier. And having a
Mhm.
Moongus to abuse opposing Trick Room or like set it for Amoonguss itself, with Trick Room being more common just across the board, feels like really, really important and really, really strong.
Yeah, hybrid teams are like historically the best teams.
Yeah,
Think of stuff like Chalk. Amoonguss was like key to stuff like that.
yeah, exactly.
It's so versatile. It's definitely a bit different in this format, but I still think it's pretty much just the god it's always been.
Yeah. People have said that like they think that like Psy Spam gets in the way of Amoonguss, but I feel like if the rest of the team isn't super like doesn't struggle with Psy Spam and with Rillaboom being around to like change terrain, um, I still feel like Amoonguss is like a
Yeah,
top tier
you can also
Pokemon.
run Pyapa Berry.
Yeah, that's true. Although I feel like Cobra Berry in order to
Koba
like
is godlike.
Cobra Berry to like ensure that you survive like max airstream feels like
Yeah,
unnecessary. But aside from the
it
point of like
depends on
talking about spreads, I just feel like Amoonguss provides like an alternate mode of redirection that we didn't have before because you always if you wanted a redirection you just felt so trapped into running Togekiss because of how good it was. Um,
maybe in DB.
yeah, but Togekiss or sorry, Amoonguss having such like relevant resistances, and like consistent sleep, and a really 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 strong way of abusing Trick Room, it just feels it feels very compelling.
Yeah, Trick Room was so strong. Like hard Trick Room has never been as good as it was this year because Among Us wasn't a thing before, which is like one of the most important pieces to be able to check that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, it gets heal pulse now.
Yeah, Pollen Puff is like a really 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 interesting addition to Among Us's moveset.
Yeah, it's cool. I don't know if I still think stuff like Sludge Bomb or Giga Drain, Energy Ball, whatever, are still good moves to run on it. But
Yeah, I
Pollen Puff
agree.
is another crazy option too.
Hmm.
Already a really good mon.
Yeah, so I think something that we'll talk about eventually is how I think the style of play in the format will change. Um, I feel like Pollen Puff, being added to Amoongus's moveset, and allowing to like give recovery to Pokemon that just normally wouldn't have it, and giving it to a really bulky like Pokemon that has a lot of staying power like Amoongus, and that benefits a lot off of like Trick Room, just feels like such a great new option for it. And I wouldn't stretch to say it's like broken because I don't think it is, because it's a really really underwhelming like offensive move, but a move that promotes like a style of play that where you like are able to position so that like Pollen Puff is meaningful feels like a really really great change.
Yeah, I love Among Us. I've never really had an issue with it. I think it's a pretty nice, healthy mon. It's
Yeah,
good to have around.
yeah,
Also, I want to point out how important sleep is in this format with Dynamax.
yeah, exactly.
We've seen Yawn be used a lot, and Spore is just so much better. Like
Hmm.
that's the one thing. That's the thing that makes me think Among Us might be better now than it's been in the past. Is just because sleeping a Dynamax is such a big deal.
Yeah,
Among Us could do that so easily if you could get Trick Room up. Like
yeah,
it,
I agree.
it's crazy. Among Us is. I could definitely see it being a top 3 mon in the format.
Hmm.
I could see it.
Yeah, and because of Dynamax, like also like just like talking about because like Indeedee and Togekiss have always been like really really strong Pokemon for the sole fact that Redirection plus Dynamax is really 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 strong, and having another option with that abuses Trick Room, and that has a different set of weaknesses. I won't necessarily say it's better.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I
Being weak
think
to Airstream kind of sucks and Side Spam, but a
yeah,
lot of Poison has a lot. Resisting Fairy and stuff's really nice.
yeah, Resisting Fairy, Water. um, I think those are all like those two are like really really really
Yeah,
really strong.
that's the bit. Those are the big deals.
All right, moving on.
Not
So
too-
we talked about size spam a bit,
Yeah,
and so I definitely think that just like in that vein, we felt that it was necessary to mention Alakazam just because it's insanely fast, it's really
it enables a
strong.
fast mode on Side Spam,
Yeah,
which it
um,
wouldn't have had otherwise.
yeah, like the addition of expanding force to like the psychic terrain duo of Hatterene and Didi, and then the addition of Alakazam for like a faster mode to just like plow through teams, is definitely like a noteworthy addition. I don't know how meta defining it is, but it's
I think
definitely
it's a little cheesy.
yeah,
It'll definitely fall off, but
yeah.
it's strong. It's strong.
Well,
It's
I
legitimately strong.
don't know about cheesy. I just feel like it's very inconsistent.
Yeah.
Cause
Side
like
spam has never really sat well with me. It just
yeah,
feels like one of those strategies people can adapt to.
cause like obviously like psychic Pokemon in general are just like really really good offensively, but at the same time like there are a lot of really common like ways to like wall out psychic spam. Cause like things
Yeah.
like Tyranitar exist. We have Magnezone like as like a really good way of just like walling out Psy spam. There's Rillaboom to change the terrain to make like expanding force single target and it's not boosted.
Yeah.
There are a lot of it feels like there's a lot of ways to like control it that feel like consistent and like easy to like position for.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
It's not as bad as like 2019 Ultra Series 5 spam, which is like ridiculous.
yeah,
This is not quite at that level.
yeah, because Alakazam it's good, but it's not a Necrozma.
It's
So
not an Ultra Necrozma.
yeah, so I definitely agree with that. But like I said, I do think that it's a noteworthy strategy because of how good Expanding Force as a move is.
Yeah.
And so we figured that it was, necessary to include Alakazam on this
One
list.
other thing to note is Alakazam gets Nasty Plot now, which it didn't have in the past, which
Yeah.
is a pretty good option to have for it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah. So it also Magic Guard Life Orb is just big damage. It's big damage.
Yeah, that's also true.
So
All right, moving on. We have the centerpiece of the Isle of Armor. We have Urshifu.
I don't know how I feel about Urshifu, to be honest.
See, so the one thing is like, and this is me thinking, like super long term is like, let's imagine Urshifu in a format that doesn't have Dynamax. Like, oh god, I don't want to think about that.
That's scary.
Unseen Fist is such a good ability that I feel like that alone makes Urshifu at least like good, like good,
Yeah.
good. Because like, and the other thing is like say for example, because one of the things that I really like about Urshifu, the rapid strike style, the water type in particular, is that it outspeeds and OHKOs both Incineroar and Arcanine with Surging Strikes. And
Yeah.
neither of those two Pokemon are very popular as Dynamax candidates. So they either have to like switch or they die.
Yeah, they're pinned basically.
Yeah.
They have Togekiss next to them.
Yeah. And so like Urshifu being able to do that like feels really, really strong. If like the water type is like a really, really, really strong check to sand because they can steel spike you, but one, you resist, and two, you just
It's
crit
crit them.
you just crit them through their defense boosts.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
so I don't know, Urshifu just seems like such a strong Pokemon, and it's another really good fast fighting type to help check Porygon2. Um so I don't know.
The problem I have with Urshifu is just okay. It's got like no SPDF,
Yeah, it's like it's
and
base
its
63.
typing is like not doesn't help it with that weakness at all. Like in the past, the thing I would like to compare it to is Kartana,
Kartana,
which
yep.
has a very similar low SPDF stat, but Kartana makes up for that with excellent typing and like ridiculous attack, like
Yeah.
insane attack. That
Base
Urshifu's like, strong, but it's not
Urshifu's like what, 130, 130, 135,
I think it's 130.
130, and then Kartana's like what, 181.
181.
Yeah,
Um,
ridiculous.
so it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's decent. I don't think it's a meta defining mon.
Yeah.
Because it's too easy to beat with a Togekiss or an Amoonguss, which both do really well against
Yeah.
it. Protect the partners from the crit moves. Has no spread moves to get around it. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard. I could totally be wrong on here, and it could be like godlike, but
Yeah.
just from my impressions so far, it's not quite what I expected.
So like one of the things that so I've played with the water Urshifu just like a bit and I've run it as Sash just so that I ensure that I get a couple attacks off. And the things that I mentioned about just like in almost like invalidating Arcanine and Incineroar in some senses, because like if they run like Citrus Berry Arcanine, then they probably survive, but at the same time like they're not doing much back.
Yeah.
But like being such a consistent check to Arcanine and Incineroar, and like I said, like Sand. We have Crocodile here on the page, which I don't see being like incredibly impactful, but it's still a Pokemon that I think people will run and that it exists. Like fighting coverage for like Porygon and steals like Magnezone. It just feels like it has too much going for it to not be less than like pretty good. Despite the fact that I feel it's definitely like walled by things like Togekiss, offensively checked by Togekiss, walled by Amoonguss. But it has such a favorable matchup against a lot of really important Pokemon that I feel like it can't be like ignorable.
Yeah. Yeah, I could agree to that too.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's so often it's just up against Amoonguss or Togekiss and can't get much done.
Yeah. Well, in that, coming off of that, I feel like as a late game Pokemon, we could see it like be really really strong, where you spend the early parts of the game eliminating the threats to Urshifu, and then you run like a life orb set and you just plow
Yeah.
through everything
Could be
because
good.
they
Yeah, I
can't
could see it
protect.
cleaning up well.
Yeah.
Maybe on
And
like
even
hyper offense
like
in the
one
back.
one of the things that I like to do was to lead Urshifu next to something like Porygon2, to help check certain things that would try and like imprison, for example, like something like
Mhm.
Chandelure or Indeedee Mail, and Surging Strike just deletes both of them,
Mhm.
and or just like it just feels like a really good like lead mon, just because of how popular a lot of like lead Pokemon like Arcanine, Sand Lead, Incineroar.
Yeah, but then also Togekiss and Amoonguss are such common leads.
Yeah, I do
And then it
agree.
makes it just having either of those on the field makes it so Urshifu can't do what it wants to against the other one. That
Yeah,
could be an Arcanine or whatever, but it doesn't matter because of your direction.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So we'll
so it's
have to
hard.
see.
It's
Yeah,
hard to
we'll have to
say.
see. And I've heard debates about people debating which is better. Like I have the water one up here because that's the one I'm more familiar with. And
Yeah,
like I said, like I was making the whole argument about how like it does really well against the fire type intimidators. But people I've heard multiple people say, James Eeks, who we had on here the last time we did the podcast, said that he
mhm.
feels like the dark type is better. Whether or not that's true, we just don't know.
Yeah.
It's too early to tell.
I just if Scrafty isn't good in this format, I just don't know if the dark fighting one can be.
But
Like Scrafty is
Scrafty
so
isn't
much more
fast
for
and
it.
it doesn't crit
But it's Scrafty. It's
and it
got
doesn't hit to
intimidate. Like, it's got so
protect.
much going for it. That typing is just
Yeah,
it's bad. Same goes for Hydreigon.
the
Like
typing is really really difficult.
and
And the
it's
other
always
thing is like
format.
one of the things that you said when we did the podcast about Dynamax was that you really didn't like that Dragapult was like one of the best counters against itself. And I feel like the
Yeah,
same goes for Urshifu if you go with the dark type, because then if you
it
get
punches
hit
them.
with the you get hit with the Urshifu mirror, like, and like say for example you like the fact that the dark Urshifu loses to the water Urshifu just
Yeah, it's also a big deal.
from the fact that it's weak, you know, to its own stab, um, just seems like, ugh.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about the water Urshifu though is that it just gets grassy glided.
Yeah,
So
but that at the same time, like Urshifu has really really good physical defense.
yeah, it can take one maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
I actually don't know the calc,
but yeah,
but yeah,
long story short is we don't really know how good it's going to be.
yeah,
Which one's going to be better, we have no idea. But there are certain things that are going for each of them that I
yeah.
think.
One last thing I want to say about Urshifu is I don't know what the best set is. I think there's a lot of room for like what item
Yeah,
people
that's
will run,
true.
what moves people will run. There's a lot of different stuff. It gets a lot of interesting moves. Like
Yeah,
you could go basic, like I don't know, close combat, surging strikes, iron head, protect, life orb,
yeah, but
whatever.
it
But you
gets
can run
the
stuff like
elemental
U-turn
punches.
or coaching.
Yeah, it
Like
gets the elemental punches. It gets all three
yeah,
elemental punches. It gets bulk up, iron head. I think it gets poison jab.
I could totally yeah.
As a way to like hit like something like Rillaboom. It
Aerial
gets
ace for airstream.
U-turn, aerial ace. It's got a lot of options.
Yeah. So I'm curious, yeah, because like there could be some revolutionary Urshifu set that just changes the way everyone looks at it.
Hmm.
But we just don't know yet.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm hopeful for it because I feel like Unseen Fist is such a ridiculous ability
It's insane. It
that
is insane.
I hope that something comes of it because I think
Yeah,
it's
we
really
can't
cool.
overstate how good Unseen Fists is.
Oh yeah, because I mean, like I said, like imagine Urshifu in a format where Dynamax didn't exist.
I don't want to.
Like it would be so ridiculously
Kills
powerful.
everything.
Yeah. All right, so moving
All
on.
right.
So towards the end of Series 4, we saw that Rillaboom saw like a spike in usage once it got access to Grassy Surge for good
Yeah.
reason because grassy terrain boosted Wood Hammer and things like that was like incredibly strong. But now we have the new move in Grassy Glide, which I feel like
Yeah.
absolutely changes the game for Rillaboom.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, it's already like incredibly fast. Or at least
I know
like
it doesn't seem like it,
with
but it
with
is.
regard to the format, I won't say it's
Yeah.
like super. It's not like like Dragapult. But
Yeah.
base 85 is like a really 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 strong speed. stat to have in this format, especially when there's so many important threats in like that base, like that low base 80 tier.
Mm-hmm.
And then Grassy Surge to overwrite competing terrains is really, really, really strong. Grassy
Yep.
Glide to abuse that and to just like delete like waters and stuff like that.
Grassy Glide is so good.
We've never had a priority move stronger than like base 50 or whatever.
Well, we've had extreme speed, but the thing with extreme speed is I can't think of a Pokemon that used like stab extreme
Stab
speed.
extreme speed, and that's boosted by terrain. And
Yeah.
it's like there's so much going for Grassy Glide.
Like the thing is like if it like maybe if it failed outside of grassy terrain, it'd be like, oh
Mhm.
whatever, okay. But the fact that it's still like a 70 power move is like legit. Like
Yeah,
that's weak, but that's not insanely weak. That's as strong as like Night Slash, which isn't the worst move ever. Like
yeah. And I mean, like, let's say for example, I'm gonna take the example of a couple other moves that are very like situationally like difficult to use. So like we've had discussions about like burnout. You know, imagine if
yeah,
burnout worked after the first time you used it.
it'd be so
It's
good.
so good. It'd be
Yeah,
so ridiculously good. Imagine if
yeah,
Poltergeist was like base 70 to start, but it
yeah. That'd
turned
be
into base
insane
110 when they had an item. You would run that on like Marowak no holds barred,
for sure. Yeah,
like and then we have that in Grassy Glide now. It's like
grassy glide is great.
it
Yeah,
abuses the terrain when you have it, and it's still like perfectly usable when you don't, just because of how naturally fast Rillaboom is. It's like wow.
yeah. And the maybe the craziest thing about it is with the Gmax form, it becomes a 160 power.
Yeah.
Not I said I was gonna say Z move, max move, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And like the G Max form is actually such a huge buff. Like Rillaboom, like I know technically it was in Series 4 and Series 3,
Mhm.
but we have it on this slide because it feels like a brand new Mon since
Yeah.
Grassy Surge came out so recently,
Yeah,
and
and I feel like
the G Max is
The
so good
Gmax
now.
form is like a pretty big game changer for it. Cause like,
Yeah, and Grassy Glide.
say for example, the like he could only run max overgrowth. That's like a base 120 max move as opposed to a base 160 max move.
Yeah,
That's a
because then you'd have
huge
to run
jump.
like Woodhammer to
Yeah,
back it up. But no, you don't have to do that now because of
yeah.
the G Max.
So like Gmax Rillaboom just seems like with Grassy Glide it just seems so potent.
Mhm.
And I've been running like a Swords Dance set, and like even at like plus
Yeah,
one, Grassy Glide does like
it's
just
ridiculous.
plows through like certain teams. It's like it's so good. And the other
Yeah,
thing is like Rillaboom has access to like a lot of really really handy moves. Like it has like superpower, high horsepower, knockoff. Like it has some
knockoff's
like really
huge.
really nice coverage. And yeah, like
Knockoff is huge because of Porygon 2, like we were.
Porygon2. There's a lot of things that like really really don't like losing their items.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, Rillaboom's crazy.
Rillaboom
Well, I
is
think one
crazy.
thing about Rillaboom, it reminds me of Togekiss in a way, in that it can either support the team, like bulky fake out, U-turn stuff, or you could just Dynamax and kill things. And just
Yeah.
having that sort of mix-up option
Hmm.
is so ridiculously
Yeah.
good.
And because like we talked about, like Grassy Glide is the reason why like Rillaboom feels like so incredibly powerful. But it also has the GMAX form, which it can just like spring on you on turn one if you feel like it's gonna go for like a fake out, and it can just
Yeah,
like nuke things, and it's like,
yeah,
gosh,
Rillaboom's a god.
it's Rillaboom is really really good. And thinking about it also is Rillaboom is an incredibly potent offensive threat that doesn't get redirected by Amoonguss,
Yeah, yeah,
and that
that's
can't get put
really
to sleep
good.
by Amoonguss either.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And Amoonguss, like, like they're not running like Sludge Bomb, can't do much to you either.
Yeah. And even if they're
Oh,
running Pollen Puff, they're not doing much anyways.
yeah, Paul.
And
Yeah,
you can run Assault Vest. Like there's so much you
there are
can.
a lot of different sets you can
Yeah.
run. You can run like Fake Out U-turn. You can run like Knock Off High Horsepower, Superpower, like
Swords
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 Dance,
Dance with
like
like I run Swords Dance with
Taunt.
Copa Berry. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it gets taunt. Oh my yeah.
Also, it can kill Lapras in one hit.
Yes, yeah, the
Like
Gmax
Draco's ult.
yeah, Miracle Seed terrain boosted Gmax move, I think
Yeah, Oko's G-Max left.
Oko's Gmax
Not
left.
through Veil because that's impossible, but
Yeah. But I mean like just like
so
if you nuke Lapras like Gmax Lapras turn one, like you've basically just like won the game.
yeah. Yeah, Gmax Rillaboom is crazy. I think it's number one in showdown usage.
Yeah.
For right now, I don't know if it will stay up there, but I could definitely see it as like a top five mon, I think for sure. Like, which is yeah, it's crazy. One thing I will say is it cannot touch Togekiss no matter what you do with it.
Yeah.
Which is really really bad.
Yeah.
Like for a lot of other Pokemon, that would kind of just be like, well, this mon isn't very good. But Rillaboom has so much else going for it that it's
Yeah,
still
exactly.
insane despite that. And the fact that the Fire Intimidators, which are on like every team, are really good against it.
Yeah.
So it's cool because it feels handleable with the right tools.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's so strong still.
Yeah, Arcanine is like the end all be all like Rillaboom destroyer
Yeah,
because you
bring
just
it
it
in,
just
burn it.
outspeeds and burns it. And
Yeah,
but the fact, like you were saying, is like the fact that Arcanine exists and is still really strong, that Togekiss exists and is still really strong, Incineroar exists and is still really strong, and these are like really really consistent checks to Rillaboom, and
yeah,
it's still this good. Like
yeah.
it's like it's
show.
crazy.
Yeah, Rillaboom's cool. I like Rillaboom. I'm pretty excited to see how it ends up.
Yeah, I really like Rillaboom too. I've been using it here and there, and it feels really really good.
Yeah, I haven't played with it much actually. I gotta build with it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
All right. So I realized that we put all three of the Swords of Justice on the slide, but they're just in different places. So I'm just gonna kind of like combine Cobalion and Virizion.
Yeah,
So
Cobalion is really interesting.
yeah, I feel like Cobalion definitely feels like a lot more compelling than Virizion, just because of like typing.
Yeah.
It's not quad weak to Airstream. It resists, or it's not weak to Psychic or Fairy, and yeah, it's just
Steal.
it's a steal.
It's a bold steal.
Yeah, it has really really great base stats. It's a bit underwhelming
It's
offensively.
weak offensively.
Yeah,
Without beat up, I don't like. Unlike Terrakion, I don't know if these two have a place without beat up on the team.
yeah, I agree. Because like I feel like their typings like help to offset the typical like or Cobalion with steel typing helps to offset its weaknesses to things like Togekiss and Psyspam. But it doesn't have much to offer like outside of that.
Yeah.
And even then, like you're just making it so you're not weak to it, not that you like
Yeah.
resist it.
It's still just like
So it's not like positioned super well typing wise. But I mean, if we're talking about like relevant Pokemon that we think are going to be seen like moving forward, like it does really well against Rillaboom, because it can
True.
like spam like Steel Spike, and it just like walls it defensively.
yeah.
But yeah, I think like you said, like I think it's hard to run either of them without beat up. It is nice. I think Virizion existing, and having access to Grassy Glide means that like terrain,
That is cool.
yeah, like terrain stuff like is like definitely relevant, and like Virizzion's just like really strong, and having like priority base 70, grassy terrain boosted stab like stuff
Yeah.
like makes it decent.
Yeah, an interesting thing with Virizion is you can like Dynamax set up your grassy terrain, and if you can live through those turns and just start grassy gliding with like a few boosts
Yeah.
of beat up, that's like really scary.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can run.
That's legit.
You could run grassy terrain, Whimsicott with grassy glide.
Oh, that's actually that's kind of clean.
Yeah, so you could do that. Yeah, and so I
That's
feel
kind
like
of cool.
yeah, that's like a strategy that you could do with Virizion. And so
Yeah,
I feel
you
like
probably wouldn't wanna
beat
run
up strategies with all three of them. Terracotta is like the classic beat up strategy, just because of how good, because Tracheon gets Rock Slide, stab Rock Slide, and it's fast. It's
It's so much stronger.
yeah. But I think now because of Dynamax and Terrakion having, or sorry, Cobalion having like a pretty good typing to wall things like Rillaboom is like really strong. And then Virizion having access to Grassy Glide and still being like a good candidate for like a beat up target makes it pretty good.
Yeah, the big thing about these two compared to Terrakion, they get bounced. Terrakion doesn't.
Yeah, they have access to
It's
Airstream.
huge. If Terrakion got bounced, dude,
That's the
crazy.
fourth move slot.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the fourth one.
Terrakion with bounce would be nuts.
Yeah.
Um, these two having access to bounce gives them like reason to be ran over them because beat up an airstream is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Cobalion is like perfect. Like its stat distribution is like built to run an assault vest. It feels like,
Yeah, that's also
which
true.
really helps its bulk. Makes it feels well rounded outside of the weak attack stat, which you make up for by beating it up.
Yeah.
So like a setup Cobalion is like really difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
Just starts airstreaming, has rock coverage with Stone Edge still to beat Charizard.
Yeah.
So Cobalion feels really legit only with beat up, but in that situation it feels really good.
Yeah. And
And
then
Virizion I feel like has its own place as well. Maybe not as I don't think it's as strong as Cobalion or Terrakion, but
Yeah.
like you said, Grassy Glide is neat, and I could see that on the right team. I could see it being a solid choice.
yeah. And my last point about Virizion will be just that it beats Amoonguss.
Yeah, true.
So
Being
that's
immune to Spore is a big deal.
being
for
immune to
these.
Spore and Rage Powder is like really really nice.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on from those, I think we will next talk about Azumarill. So
Personal favorite of mine.
yeah, Azumarill's
Azumarill.
really really great. Like the one trouble that I have with it is like before people used to run it with just like belly drum with like fake out or redirection.
Yeah,
And then you
go
would just
all in on supporting it.
yeah. Whereas like now I feel like running like a belly drum strategy with like how much like spread damage there is and with like the power creep from Dynamax making it really
Yeah,
hard to like have the staying power to like set up and then start attacking
yeah,
on a Pokemon that has like a lot of like it's not like the greatest like the bulkiest um
hmm
makes it like difficult to run the belly drum set. So I've talked to Dimitri about this and James and other people saying like we don't think that like belly drum is like the way to go just because like you need like immediate offense a lot of times.
hmm
And so I don't know, it's like Azumarill getting walled by something like Amoonguss, being like really hard checked by Rillaboom.
hmm
It's in a really really awkward spot where like yes like Water Fairy is an excellent typing and it's those are like incredible stabs and Life Orb with like the Dynamax boost to your moves with huge power is like ridiculous, but at the
Yeah,
same time it's like at a really really awkward spot in terms of speed and it's like checked by a lot of really important things in the format. It makes it like I think it's difficult to use, but it's definitely like a notable addition to the format.
yeah. It'll have a place. The big thing about it to me is just like with Dynamax, Aqua Jet just doesn't pick up the KOs that it used to.
Yeah. So you're like
Things are gonna have defense
you're forced to
boosts.
run liquidation.
Yeah, things are gonna have defense boosts. Things are gonna have double their HP. And if you're not picking up KOs with Aqua Jet, if you're not picking up like one hit KOs with Aqua Jet, it's not worth it. Um, that's the reason. It's similar to the reason Scizor isn't even on our slide right now because it doesn't pick
Yeah.
up the KOs with Bullet Punch that it used to.
Scizor
Um,
just couldn't cut it.
yeah, rip Scizor. But yeah, so I feel like Belly Drum is like not like you can like Belly Drum into Dynamax, which is like pretty good.
Yeah.
But the way I look at Azumarill is I think it'll be a good trick room sweeper, kind of similar to Marowak, in
Hmm.
that like, or except you, it kind of feels like it has to Dynamax.
Hmm.
But it does get some good moves now. It gets high horsepower now,
Yep.
which is really good with Max Quake. It gets
Steel
Steel
roller.
Roller now, which is really good
Yeah.
for Max Steel Spike, and could also just be a decent like if you Dynamax, if you're using it mainly for Steel Spike, you can like Steel Roller like in the late game to get rid of an important train or something, which is
Hmm.
cool. Like I think there's stuff it can do. Liquidation is really good, um, and it's another fairy.
Yeah.
Feels like we've just been running Togekiss Mimikyu when it's got all formats, so
Yeah.
it's not at least another alternative option. Oh, and I guess it's like Primarina. I forgot Primarina.
Yeah.
So it's like a physical Primarina kind of.
Yeah.
I could see it being okay. It's not gonna be the beast it used to be.
Yeah.
Just,
The thing that I'm hearing, with us talking about it now is that like we think Azumarill will be like, pretty decent,
yeah,
but it just won't be the same. you
It's
know.
not the same. Yeah.
Like the belly drum
Fortunately.
set like was like the defining feature of like Azumarill in the past. Like very
Yeah.
rarely would you see like sets that went like full like 4 attacks or like 3 attacks protect. Like
Yeah.
belly drum was by far like
Now
the most
that's the way
common
to go.
set. Whereas I feel like now you probably want to run like either like 3 attacks protect with life orbs so that you have like the coverage and like the space in your move set to run a move like steel roller or high horsepower to get like max
Hmm.
quake or steel spike boosts,
Hmm.
and just so that you have enough coverage in order to make your Dynamax meaningful.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Or like
I think
four
it'll still
attacks
be.
assault vest.
Yeah, I think 4 attacks assault fest or like 3 attacks protect life orb. I
Yeah,
think those are
those seem
like
like the way to go.
really really good sets. Because then you have the room to like run a defense boosting max move,
Yeah.
while still having like dual stab. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like it just like I said, like I think it'll just be a different Pokemon.
Yeah. I miss you 2015 Azumarill.
Yeah, Azumarill was a threat back then because like
Yeah.
+6 Aqua Jet was
They picked
really
off
really
KOs on
really
everything.
potent. Yeah, exactly. Um,
One quick little thing about Azumarill that I think is kind of neat is you can like Dynamax set up Misty Terrain and then Steel Roller. I don't know. That's just kind of cool.
yeah, yeah,
Because you can
I
block spores and then hit a move with Steel Roller,
yeah. Which
which is neat. Nothing crazy, but
yeah,
it's
you know, now that you say that, like being able to set Misty Train to like stop a Mungus Spore is like really really nice.
yeah. Yeah. Azumarill's interesting. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm very curious, but I don't anticipate Belly Drum being the most common set. Is the main thing.
Agreed.
Like it was before.
Hmm.
All right, moving on. We have. I'm gonna leave Volcarona for last, just because I think it's a really like
Yeah,
interesting Pokemon to talk
we don't
about.
want to end on Crocodile.
Yeah. So I think I want to talk about Crocodile first. So, I know that Wolf in one of his videos said that he thought Crocodile was going to be like a really important addition to the decks.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I don't necessarily like blame him like for that. Or not blame. Like I can see where he was coming from when
Yeah,
he said that when he was talking about it. The one issue that I have with it now is that I think Crocodile would have been really, really good if Dragapult had stayed as like the defining like meta Pokemon like of the format. But that's
uh-huh.
not the case. You know, Porygon
Yeah.
2 has come like and like I feel like that changes like Dragapult's ability to like sweep through teams like it used to be able to.
Hmm.
Um and so like Crocodile like not being able to like to check something like not being able to check Azumarill, not being able to check Rillaboom, like that's just it's such a hard spot for an Intimidator. That's like an,
Yeah.
it's just yeah. I don't know if it's as good as we had hoped because you know I had hopes for it too. You know because Dragapult was the problem Pokemon for Series 4, and so like seeing like another like a dark type Intimidator with like you know like stab foul play and like pretty good
Hmm.
speed was like I was like oh like that's cool like I feel like that could be pretty good.
Hmm.
But with Dragapult falling off and other Pokemon that do really really well against Crocodile coming to the forefront,
Yeah, Rain.
yeah, and Crocodile doesn't have knockoff. Like it loses to
Ah,
Porygon 2.
yeah.
Like that's really rough.
That was so weird. Because, like, it is a world championship winning Pokemon,
Hmm.
and it's gotten quite a few neat buffs this gen with, because it gets like horsepower now.
Yep.
It gets Lash Out, which is a really cool new move.
Yeah.
It gets close combat now. Um, but I just feel like it doesn't have enough going for it to justify how garbage it is against Togekiss.
Yeah.
It's just utterly useless.
Togekiss. It's not even that good against a Mungus.
Yeah,
Um.
it can taunt Mungus to be fair.
Oh yeah, that's true. Um.
Yeah, but still,
It doesn't do well against Rillaboom. It doesn't do well against Azumarill. It doesn't do that well against Politoed. It's like, man, it's like it's so hard.
it does seem decent against Sand if Sand ends up being really good. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Sand
know.
will feel the same. I don't know if Sand will be nearly as good as it was before.
I
So
don't think so. Mainly because like we have the addition of like some really good fighting types in Urshifu and Terrakion.
yeah,
Um.
which is why I thought Excadrill would probably go down, is because
Yeah.
Sand isn't quite as good.
Yeah. And
Although
then.
Tyranitar is still amazing on its own. But yeah,
Mhm. And then we have more competing weathers with Politoed Kingdra. It's like
yeah,
you know I don't really think and I think Excadrill in general is a bit harder to use with like Rillabooms running around and like
Yeah.
Porygon2 like walling it pretty efficiently. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
That
it's
makes
like
sense. And
Crocodile would have been if you just like had taken Crocodile like on its own, like no other Pokemon, and just dropped into Series 4, would have been like, oh, sick, like that's cool.
yeah, that would
That
have been
that
legitimate.
would have been like good.
Still don't know if it would have been able to get around Togekiss, but
Yeah,
it would have at
uh,
least been better.
yeah. Um, it would have. I think it would have been a lot more meaningful than I think its addition into this
Yeah.
format is like right now. So yeah, I don't know. But the one thing,
Neat.
we have to honor our boy Hayden, and it's an anger point Pokemon. We didn't have any anger point
Yes.
Pokemon before, so if any of you are trying to run an anger point strategy, there's you can run
Dark Urshifu.
the Dark Urshifu and Wicked Blow through Protect and activate anger point.
On Crocodile. Oh, yep, yep. Good
Yep.
luck with Togekiss, though.
I mean, you have rock moves.
Yeah, yeah. I just
Um,
mean getting the Wicked Blow off against Follow Me.
oh well, like you said, we said before that with the introduction of Amoonguss being like a really really good redirection Pokemon, um, that we could potentially see like a fall off in like support Togekiss.
Yeah, it
So
could be more offensive.
you never know.
Yeah.
You never
Well, I
know.
think they still want to follow
I
me,
feel like
but
Crocodile has like a niche, but I don't know. I doubt that it'll be a incredibly impactful addition to the meta.
yeah, it's cool to have another Intimidator in the format. But the thing to me is, it feels like there aren't enough compelling fire types to drop the two fire Intimidators
Yeah.
on like the vast majority of teams.
Hmm.
We'll have one of the two still.
Yeah. I agree.
So it's like, does Crook really fit? I don't know.
Cause oh man,
I don't know.
Arcanine's like I've like playing with Arcanine feels so right in this format still. Like it's such a
Yeah,
comfortable like
I
it's
love Arcanine and Incineroar. I just love playing with both of them.
yeah,
They just feel good.
they're great.
Yeah,
Especially with like how good Rillaboom has been.
yeah. Rillaboom just doesn't quite have the support options that things like those two have. No Fake Out,
Yeah,
no Will-O-Wisp, no U-turn, stuff like that.
yeah, and
If
just
Crocodile got Party Shot, that would be hype. I wish it got Party
I'm
Shot.
surprised it doesn't. Now that you're
Yeah,
saying
it seems
that.
like it would be one that could get it.
But oh well. But
Ah, well.
I had hopes, and I still do, but I also have doubts
We'll see.
about how impactful Crocodile will be. But like you said, we'll see. The first day of the format is tomorrow, so we
Yeah,
will
I'm
see
excited.
how that shapes up.
Mhm.
And then to conclude our discussion about the impactful additions from the Isle of Armor, we are going to talk about Volcarona.
Volcarona, man.
So
So weird.
yeah, so like you were saying, like we didn't have like a ton of fire types, like, and the thing is, like the fire types that we did have, like, seemed to like lend themselves to like certain archetypes.
Yeah.
So we had like the Sun archetype where you run Torkoal, or Charizard, and even on like the majority of like Sun teams, you run a Hard Trick Room mode, which is like the Torkoal archetype.
Mhm.
Hard Trick Room teams run Torkoal. That's like your fire type.
Yeah.
And then like good stuffs with like Dragapult and Togekiss always had an Arcanine. Like that's
Yeah.
or
Or
an
Lapras teams.
or an Incineroar, like had an like an Incineroar.
Mhm.
And yeah, like Lapras teams always had either an Arcanine or an Incineroar.
Mhm.
But now we have Volcarona, which it's such an interesting
Weird.
Pokemon
Yeah.
to me. I've used it a bit, and it doesn't feel bad. Having access to like strong airstream is a big plus.
Yeah.
It's at a really good place speed wise. Speed tying with
Hunter's godlike.
yeah, 100's like it's always been like an amazing speed
Yeah.
to be at.
Like in the past, it was like a solid one. Now it's like amazing.
Yeah. And the other thing is, Volcarona gets access to Rage Powder.
Yeah.
So the way that I see it is that like one, Volcarona is a really, really, really good check to Rillaboom. It's like that's one thing.
Yeah. True. Actually, yeah. Pretty much one of the best.
Two, it reminds me of like the hybrid Togekisses that people ran in Series
Yeah.
4 with like Follow Me and like Protect or like Yawn and another like or another support move and then like Dual Stab.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you still had Follow Me. So you had like the option to like Dynamax and like either like Airstream or like just like you have the option to Dynamax and use really strong attacks, but you also
Hmm.
have the option to Follow Me to support other members, and you can still deal like a decent amount of damage without Dynamaxing.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I feel like Volcarona is like, and because it's like a Pokemon that checks like things like Amoonguss really well,
Hmm.
Rillaboom, uh, it just seems like a really really really
Yeah.
strong Pokemon. It's at such a good place speed wise, and it has like all these support options and like good offense. Like it does like on paper, it seems really weird, but I feel like in practice it'll be like a lot stronger than we might think initially.
Yeah. I think people are sleeping on it a little bit. I think
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen with Volcarona is it's going to be like reinvented
Mm-hmm.
compared to what it's because like the definitive set in the past is Quiver Dance. You
Mm-hmm.
fake out Quiver Dance, Rage Powder Quiver Dance,
Yeah.
go for a sweep. Don't quite think that works in this format.
Yeah.
It's too easy to just die to a Tyranitar. Togekiss just
Yeah.
takes you on
And
3-0.
admittedly, like Firebug flying coverage isn't that great.
It's not nothing crazy.
Yeah.
It's like okay.
Yeah, it's
You
fine.
really kill grass types, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the way it's going to go is you find the perfect balance between Rage Power support
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to go offensive with
Yeah,
Dynamax. I
exactly.
don't know if you need Quiver Dance. Maybe you could do a weird set with Quiver Dance and Rage Powder. I don't know. Volk is so weird. Like my initial reaction is like, oh, it's too weak to like Tyranitar and
Yeah.
Togekiss for it to get much done in this
And
format.
Politoed and
Yeah, Politoed, all the waters. But also it does have access to Giga Drain, which is important. I think.
yeah.
Max Overgrowth is legit. But the more I think about it, I feel like it has its place.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gonna have to be a bit different than it was in the past. But I
Yeah.
think it'll still be really good.
Yeah.
Which is cool because like Volcarona has always been one of the coolest mons. Just
Yeah.
the way it operates. It's so unique. The fact dude, it's a bug type and it's still good. That's how you know it's got some good stuff
That's the
going for it.
telltale sign.
Yeah.
When you have like a
Yeah.
crappy type and you're like a
You're
really
fucking
strong.
weak to rock, dude. Like, come on.
Yeah. And you're weak to water, flying, like really, really
Yeah,
like
like those are bad
two
weaknesses.
like really, really important weaknesses.
Yeah.
Especially in VGC.
For sure. The cool thing about Volk is that I think having a mon that has good Flutterby is cool because we have not had that the entirety
Yeah.
of the format besides your
Man.
good old Volt set.
Man. Yeah, Flutterby is like it's
It should have a place. Whirlwind is so good. It's
yes.
because there are
Because
good,
I mean
there
like
are good users of
Snarl.
it though.
Snarl is like an insanely like strong move. Like
Yeah.
we've seen it like over and over and over and over again
Yeah.
on different Pokemon and Flutterby is just, stab single target bug Snarl and it's like
Yeah. And the thing is, like, you don't have like, there's no special intimidate. So like, Flutterby is one of the very few, and there's no special burn. Like, Flutterby is one of the few ways to control special damage, especially on a model with really high special defense. It's cool. Like,
yeah.
it's really cool. I'm really interested in Volcarona.
Yeah. I think that hybrid between like being able to like support other members and still having access to offense is like
Yeah,
like
it's
I really
literally
like
just
that
like
idea.
Togekiss,
Yeah.
which is a good sign.
Yeah. And like you said, like we haven't had a ton of like diverse or like versatile fire types, I'll say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Cuz
cool
like
to have another option.
yeah, and I feel like the other thing is like when I say versatile fire types is like on something like Torkoal, you have like two different sets. You have like
Yeah.
full offense with like eruption, and then you had that set that like Marcus invented with like heat wave
Yeah,
body
yeah.
press and yawn.
Yeah, that was cool.
And like those are cool. And then you have like Incineroar, which always runs the same like 4 or 5 moves. And then you have Arcanine, which is either physical or special, but basically does the same thing either way.
Or you run Justified.
Or you run like some Justified or Choice Band
Jeez.
crap. And then Charizard's always the same.
Choice Band was legit. I remember Choice Band being a decent set for a bit, but it
Yeah.
didn't really pick up. But
yeah,
for the most part, yeah.
For the most part, like when you see an Arcanine or an Incineroar or a
You
Charizard
know
or
what
a
it's gonna
Torkoal on
do.
team preview, you kind of know what it's
Yeah.
going to do. Whereas I feel like, and there are like flow charted ways of dealing with that. Whereas I feel
Hmm.
like Volcarona, with its access to like redirection, as well as like speed control with Airstream, damage
Yeah.
control with Flutterby, damage
Yeah.
stacking with Flare, it's like it has a lot going for it, I feel
And
like.
it's got flame body like on top of that all,
Yeah.
like which is a pretty good ability.
Hmm. So yeah, I think Volcarona, I think people, like you said, are sleeping on Volcarona, and I feel like it's going to be
Definitely.
a really, 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 really interesting Pokemon to watch
Yeah.
develop in this format.
Definitely not gonna be like a defining Metamon,
Hmm.
but I think like a lot of these, I think it's gonna have its place for
Yeah.
sure. And I think
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Which I
It's a
think,
really cool move.
to wrap up and to just kind of like, bring in like the bigger ideas that we're trying to pull out through this discussion is like a lot of these Pokemon aren't like outwardly like broken, like OP, like
Yeah,
these are like the meta defining Pokemon. Um, they have
maybe
easy
maybe.
ways like to be countered. Like there's like really consistent checks to be able to beat them, but they all have their place. In the grand scheme of things. Whereas like Series 4 felt so like centralizing. Every team had like a Dragapult and or a Togekiss and or an Excadrill and or a Tyranitar, yada
Yeah,
yada yada yada.
it was
Um,
ridiculous how strong like Dragapult, Dusclops, Tyranitar Prim stuff, Pharaoh, like
yeah,
that stuff was like too good. It felt like.
yeah. But like with this format, like everything seems to be like strong but not meta defining, like you said.
Mhm.
And my hope is and in my experience with this format already, it feels like that's a good sign for the future of 2020, just because
Mhm.
like overly centralized Pokemon, like especially ones that, it's hard because like we've had formats where certain Pokemon have like become overly centralizing, but it just feels like because of Dynamax, like the momentum that you gain like from that is
Yeah.
like so difficult to like deal with at times. And the
Yeah.
other thing is like the one distinction that I'm thinking of now is like the impact that finding out what, or like knowing what the set on that Pokemon is, has never been more important than it was in Series 4. Like if
Hmm.
you didn't know it was like a weakness policy Dragapult and you hit into it, like you could just lose that game
GG.
like straight up, like right there. If
Hmm.
you didn't know it was a weakness policy Togekiss, if your opponent leads Excadrill Togekiss, this is the classic example that we used over and over
Who
again
has
in
the
the
weakness
podcast.
policy? Who's
Who
gonna
has the weakness
Dynamax?
policy? Who's going to Dynamax? And it had never been so difficult to like manage that mind game than before, because of how
Yeah.
strong each option was. You
Yeah.
know, whereas I feel
I
like
think
in this
like
format, like you play a lot more responsively.
yeah. I think specifically Porygon2 and Amoonguss just give us the ability to handle those sorts of situations without having to guess,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
which is awesome.
yeah, I think that's a perfect way of putting it. Is like we finally have like a wide array of like defensive options and like
Yeah, we
support
have the tools.
styles of like, yeah, we have the tools to be able to like play safely.
Yeah.
Whereas like with like the my Grimmsnarl Dragapult team, it felt like every turn was a risk.
Yeah, 'cause it kind of was
And it,
like
it just felt like a symptom of the format because I could never get away from it no matter how like much I tried to find the most consistent play.
yeah, it almost felt like 2016 in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
which is just the worst format. Like
Yeah.
it felt like individual turns and too much importance and like
Yeah.
guessing and like, oh no, Xerneas got Geomancy up, guess I lose. Like, oh
Yeah.
no, they got a weakness policy boost, guess I lose. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know. I think at least my initial impressions of that series five, we're able to handle that a lot better.
Hmm. I agree.
So
Yeah, because like I was talking to some of my friends that like play singles and people that just had questions about VGC, and they were like talking about like hacks, for example. And I'm not gonna like talk about like the game with regard to hacks, but I was just saying like
mhm.
hacks becomes more important when the games are shorter because each
Yeah,
turn is more important. And in
yeah,
the same like light, when each turn is more important, every single decision that you make is more impactful, and that's just like, it doesn't feel like the healthiest way to play the game.
Yeah.
And so like Pokemon like Porygon2 and even things like Politoed, Amoonguss, like Magnezone that have like a lot of like bulk,
Hmm.
that are able to slow the game down, just feels like such a great measure to like counteract this, like the like awful like speed of
Yeah.
the games that like happened in Series 4.
Yeah. Trick Room just feels so much less like of a commitment,
Yeah.
which is, I think, really important. It's really important that Trick Room isn't a commitment.
Hmm.
And I think that's what Porygon 2 lets us do now.
Yeah.
So it's not just Dragon Pulp mashing Airstream every game.
Yeah.
We have an answer to it.
And just thinking about like speed control in general, like, or just like in terms of team building, like when you build a team, like you have a Porygon 2, but you don't have to have like a hard Trick Room team.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas like I felt that was pretty rare like beforehand, where you had like Trick Room modes, and even then, like if you had a Trick Room mode within like the span of like a single game, you either committed to using that Trick Room mode or not using that Trick Room mode.
Yeah.
Whereas like Porygon 2 can act completely like outside of Trick Room and be like still really, really, really strong.
Hmm. Yeah, it's perfect. It's like old teams would just be like, all right, 5 Trick Room and then a Dragon Pulse I can Shadow Sneak. But now it feels like you can get a lot more creative.
Yeah. Yeah. The revival of those like hybrid teams that
Yeah.
you and I used to always run back in like 2017, 2018. Like those were like peak Pokemon.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that brings us to our last slide.
Yep. This is our
This sums it all up right
this
here.
sums up our feelings about Series 5,
Yeah.
as opposed to Series 3 and 4.
It, I know it's still really early, but it feels so much better to me so far. I'm
Yeah.
really happy with the changes
Yeah.
that have been made.
Porygon 2 is just such a more like versatile and admittedly like skill-based Pokemon than Dusclops ever felt like.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you have the option to run it like offensively or like as speed control. It's just a more efficient wall just because of like better typing,
hmm
consistent recovery. It's just like, oh, it
yeah.
feels so good to use.
With Porygon 2, it's like I feel like Porygon 2 won't run Ally Switch very often because it has other things it can do, whereas Dusclops ran Ally Switch so much.
Yeah.
Like Porygon 2 just feels so much healthier, and I think it was the perfect thing to add to this format.
Yeah.
To help control all the stupid things that were happening before.
Yeah. And so in general, we just felt that like Series 4 was a really, really volatile format, just because of like how potent threats like Dynamax, Dragapult, and Togekiss were. And Series 5, I think we'll see a significant deceleration in, like the style of play of the game, which I think in general is, more, it lends itself to a much healthier way of playing the game. Whereas like where the game's not just, a guessing game or a whose team has like the better like gimmick to beat the opponent's team.
Yeah.
It feels like who has like the best tools to like position to win the game in the end game in a lot of ways, in a lot of times, because like the games are like longer, like more drawn out, and who uses those tools the best in order to like outlast their opponent at times.
Yeah. I think the key is we have the defensive reactive options to handle offensive Dynamax proactivity so much better now. So much better.
Yeah. Agreed.
It's awesome. I feel like it's going to lead to a much more consistent, skill-based, enjoyable format. Yeah, I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I'm so happy about it. I said, when we first started talking about Series 5, where I was like, P2 has come to save us. And, I meant it very, I said it, in jest, but I meant it very literally in that Porygon 2 goes so far to like slow down the pace of the game by checking Dragapult and Togekiss, and having speed control and all these things, that I think it's just such a healthy change for the game, and I am very much looking forward to playing in Series
I've been
5.
having so much more fun with Series 5.
And hopefully, for whoever bothers to watch this, that you have some, information on how you might want to approach building in this format, what Pokemon you think are strong, and maybe what options you might want to consider either adapting or abandoning moving forward just because of the change in the style of play. But yeah, I think we, both Demitri and I are very, very optimistic about Series 5, and we're very, very happy with, the Pokemon that returned in the Isle of Armor. And so I think Series 5 is going to be a good time. And I really, really hope, because, like we said this at the beginning of the entire year, around the time that the games dropped, like, oh, like this format feels so great, and Dynamax is so interesting, and then people started to realize how much, like, how momentum based they could play the game.
Yeah.
And so now, looking at Series 5, like, at the start, and it's like, it seems easier to play position based. My hope is really just that, like, that holds up, and that, like, this maintains, like, a very, like, steady, consistent, flat ground, level, consistent, skill based style of, like, competition.
Yeah. I don't want to look back on all this optimism and feel stupid about it.
Yeah, because I do feel that at times when I look back on, like, the way that we played at Dallas, and I was just like,
Yeah.
man, we played so honestly, and, like, why couldn't we have just, like, stayed that way?
Good times. Good
And
times.
so my hope is that that's not the case with Series 5. But my belief is that I think that it'll hold up. I think Porygon2 is a very honest Pokemon, and, the other Pokemon go a long way with helping that trend.
Porygon2 is the key.
Porygon2 is
Duck,
our
duck.
savior, our Lord and Savior. Quack on him.
Yes.
All right, so I think that concludes our discussion of Series 4 and Series 5. If you hadn't already had a chance, go back and listen to the podcast that me, Demitri, and James Eeks, otherwise known as Eeks TV, did on Dynamax, and the implications that we think it has for competitive Pokemon and VGC in general. I think that might give you a bit more insight as to our thoughts on things like Dragapult and Togekiss, if you weren't already familiar with how those look in VGC. But yeah, we're both very, very optimistic about Series 5, and how the style of play will change to, I think, better favor a healthier way of playing the game. And yeah,
Thanks a lot for
thanks for a lot for whoever listened. I really hope that someone makes it to the end.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will hopefully be making more and more content throughout the summer, and we really appreciate those of you who come out and listen.
Yeah, thanks so much.